Air pollution is not a Delhi specific problem. Even if you consider our national standard, almost 60% of the country does not meet that national standard.
It's a leading cause of diabetes, hypertension, depression, infertility. Like, it affects everything in your body and you cannot see it. It's invisible. PM 2.5 level in this room right now is over 150.
A lot of people, not just Gen Z, actually tend to think that aaj zindagi ji lete hain, kal ki kal dekhenge. That's the mindset that we have to change.
You cannot escape air pollution. Putting an air purifier everywhere, it's going to get them clean air. It's not, So there's no compensation for clean air.
What can someone do to improve indoor air quality?
Take your shoes off outside your home. Brush off your clothing or whatever before you come into the house. Of course, your greatest source of air pollution in your home is your
Air pollution's affecting, what type of diseases. Number one is cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, all these crazy heart attacks that you're seeing now, and the doctors and scientists are coming and saying this.
It's surprising that when I'm talking to school students, for them, they are more concerned if I tell them that air pollution is giving you acne or white hair.
Now, the government is heavily focused on smart cities. Forget about smart cities. Your cities will never become smart. Unless we create opportunities in rural India, our cities don't stand a chance.
We're talking about something today that affects all of us but doesn't get spoken about enough. And I think it affects us in more ways that we can imagine, the more ways that we've realized and more ways that we actually talk about. Air pollution, a breathing crisis, an air apocalypse, if I may say so. India has 21 of the 30 most polluted cities in the world, but from what I've been told, we actually have 100 out of 100 most polluted cities in the world, just that we've not measured and monitored those cities and the air quality levels there. But I know that our air is killing millions prematurely. What does this mean beyond numbers? Who's responsible for this? How do we fix it? Why is no one talking about it? I know that it's not a city problem, it's not a seasonal problem, and it's definitely not someone else's problem. Is air pollution a silent crisis we've normalized? Who's responsible, and how do we begin to fix it? Welcome to Sustainability with Shreya. We've got a team of experts here from diverse backgrounds who've dedicated their entire lives to solving this issue, and I'd love to hear it from you individually about how do we begin to tackle it. What do we need to do, and how do we, for once, solve it if we can?
So I'm Bhavreen Kandhari, and I work as a citizen on clean air, and in every way. And we have a group of mothers now across the country. We call ourselves warrior moms because we're all battling for clean air for our children. Fine.
Thank you, Shreya, for having me in these conversations. I am Sagnik Dey. I'm a professor at Center for Atmospheric Sciences, IIT Delhi. And my research actually focuses on understanding the impact of climate change and air pollution on health.
Hi, Shreya. I'm Dhar Gupta. I'm a clean air activist and entrepreneur who's recently converted to ecological restoration as well. Very well documented victim of air pollution in India. I was diagnosed with bronchial asthma in 2013, and so this is kind of a personal crusade for me. Loads of work over the years. Started the first citizens movement, creating awareness about air pollution called Our Right to Breathe back in 2014. Many protests on the street where we kind of collaborated together.
Yeah, I'm Abhiir. I'm a youth environmentalist and a sustainability consultant.
Starting off with, I want to ask, how would you describe air pollution in one sentence, and why would anyone listening to this should listen to what you have to say today?
So yeah, Shreya, I know, very valid. I would be here as a parent. Everyone has to. I think mostly you all have family, and everybody wants to give the best to your children. You want to see them most healthy, and this is what is killing them every second of their lives when they're breathing. This is toxicity we are giving them. So this is enough reason for everyone to come and jump in and have demand clean air and make sure that happens to the children.
I would say that if you rank all the risk factors that affect our day to day life, air pollution comes second in India after child and maternal malnutrition, above all other risk factors. And that clearly tells how important it is.
Yeah, so about 10 years of work, I truly believe awareness precedes change. So we've been working on creating awareness. Why air pollution is important? It is a silent killer, and it is the greatest contributor to morbidity and mortality. Depending on where you live, you're looking at reduced lifespans, what we call YLL, years of life lost between 5 to 12 years. But it's not just the years of life lost. I think the morbidity is more scary. To be alive and living with medical problems is not a quality of life. And so, we are trying to create more awareness. So we drive towards change and hopefully a better quality of life.
For me, I think air pollution, I too, realized that it was affecting me when I discovered that I had bronchitis. So for me, that's how it started out as well. If I'm to describe it in one sentence, I think it's really a slow burn, right? It's invisible, it's out there, but people aren't aware about it in the way that they are when it comes to an earthquake or a tsunami, right? So I think it's a slow burn, and it's not that people don't talk about it. It's that it's not reaching the right audiences, and it's not impacting us in the way that we should, because Gen Z and a lot of people, not just Gen Z, actually tend to think that आज जिंदगी जी लेते हैं कल की कल देखेंगे, right? So that's the mindset that we have to change, and need to get out of this sort of vicious cycle and make it about how everyone in society has to do their bit for this rather than just specific groups one at a time.
We're sitting here in Delhi today, and Delhi is said to be one of the most polluted cities in the world. We all talk about AQI, right? Everyone's measuring AQI, and Delhi is said to have a dangerous level of AQI. But this air quality index, what does it actually mean? And is it just Delhi? Is it just a Delhi problem, or is it an all India problem?
Okay, so I think, clearly what we have learned in the last decade or so is that air pollution is not a Delhi specific problem. If you talk about the numbers, I would say that even if you consider our national standard, I would say almost 60% of the country does not meet that national standard, which, by the way, is many-fold higher than the WHO air quality guideline. Having said that, the problem is more intense in the entire northern India, as well as, I would say, from west in Pakistan all the way to Bangladesh. So we call this Indo-Gangetic plain. It is geographically disadvantaged because you have almost 900 million people living here, all possible pollution sources, and then it's a low-lying area. So when you emit pollutants, the pollutants cannot disperse north or south because of the high mountains, and it is basically oscillates east and west by wind. So that's in a very simple term what science does. Also, we need to keep in mind that there are seasonal patterns in the pollutions, which is aggravated during the winter because of the unfavorable conditions. And it means that when you look for the whole year, yes, Delhi has very high pollution level, but then it's really not within just the Delhi city. But as I said, like even if you go to the rural areas, the pollution levels are pretty high for different reasons also we can discuss later. Now coming to your other questions about AQI. So AQI was introduced to convey about air pollution in a more simpler term, because when you talk about air pollutions, again, there are different types of pollutants. One pollutant specifically is known as particulate matter. These are the particles that are present in air.
PM
Yes,
levels
this is
that we
PM
measure.
2.5, and 2.5 means these particles are smaller than 2.5 micron. And just to tell you how small it is, if you take a single hair, that hair is actually 70 micron diameter. So these particles we are talking about 30 times smaller than the width of a hair. So they are invisible. When we breathe, these particles go all the way into our respiratory system, and from there is basically channeling your body. But in addition to PM 2.5, there are many other gaseous pollutants also, like ozone, for example, nitrogen oxides, which is directly emitted by transport and all. So when you have different types of pollutants, how do you really convey that message? Because your concentrations will vary from pollutant to pollutant. So AQI was introduced to convey the overall cumulative impact of different pollutants. And then these levels are traced. But I will mention one important point is that the current AQI thresholds that we use, there are no health study to say that AQI less than 50 is deemed as safe. It is just like, kind of more of a perception that when you use AQI is less than 50, we call it little bit safe.
Yeah.
And then 51 to 100 is
Yes.
satisfactory.
It's too big.
But there are no real study to show that it is really safe. Number one. Number two is actually that we are arguing now that AQI does not always convey the true message of or true impact of health. And there is a need actually to convert AQI. In fact, we are working with some of the other colleagues to propose AQI, conversion of AQI to air quality health index. So where really we incorporate the health aspect of it.
What are your thoughts on AQI? Anyone? We can chime in.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a cocktail of pollutants in the air. I think as Dr. Dey just mentioned, the primary driver of air pollution in India remains PM 2.5, which is also a black carbon nanoparticle. It's a toxin. Okay, I think there's a misconception. People think this is an allergen. So they'll take an antihistamine or an anti-allergy and the problem will go away. It won't. This is a black carbon nanoparticle that is so small that it beats the natural filters of your body, then your nasal hair, your mucus and membrane, and goes into your lungs and through the alveoli, just like oxygen is absorbed into the blood. This black carbon nanoparticle then enters your bloodstream and travels to your heart, your brain, every essential organ in the body. And this is a big problem because it's a leading cause of diabetes, hypertension, depression, infertility. Like it affects
Air pollution
everything.
causes all of that.
It affects everything in your body. Infertility. I mean, people think, why aren't we having children? Is it lifestyles? Is it stress? This is when I was talking about being a driver of morbidity. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. This is not an allergen. There's a misconception. People take it lightly and you cannot see it. It's invisible. I'm certain the PM 2.5 level in this room right now is over 150, which is about 30 times the safe level. But we're breathing here normally thinking that this is like a great interaction and it's such a healthy and safe environment. It's not. We don't have healthy and safe environments in India. No matter where you are in India, if you're in an urban area, for sure, you're in really, really poor air. And I just want to mention that at a macro level, there are only three raw materials that our human body consumes: food, air, and water. And we consume, food and water combined, we consume about, 6 to 8 liters in a day. We consume 12,000 liters of air in a day. Okay?
12,000
liters of air in a day. So if 12,000 liters of bad air are entering your body every day, the outcome cannot be good. And that is a strong reason for us to kind of, drive for change in our country.
And I'll just add to that, because the air that we're breathing, I mean, to know that, yes, these are our children here, it's continuing to breathe. There's no pause. There's nothing you can stop. You give me a glass of water, it's dirty, you're not going to drink it. Even a beggar's not going to drink that. Nobody's going to drink dirty water when you see it. but you don't see this, and that is the challenge. When you're saying that is the challenge, you're not realizing you're actually allowing your children to breathe the worst poison and the worst toxicity that you can give them. So you may want to send them to the best schools. You want to give them wash their vegetables and fruits like 10 times, and do all those kind of things, but in the end you're giving them only poison. So
I do want to ask, what is the PM 2.5 that you mentioned? The nanoparticle, where does that come from?
It's a direct,
Emissions.
it's a direct byproduct of combustion. So that's why we in Delhi, or anywhere in the world, you'd say, it's said that, air pollution is a burning issue. And there's a pun intended because it's a direct byproduct of combustion. So that's why, climate change and air pollution are intertwined, because climate change is also primarily driven by use of fossil fuels. So climate change impacts air pollution, and air pollution impacts climate change.
So it's a vicious
smoke
cycle.
is like anything. Smoke is PM 2.5. Any dust is PM 10.
So your
So that's the
cars, your
way.
factories, anything that's burning and emitting any combustion, basically.
And also, I would add that even when you are emitting these gaseous pollutants like sulfur dioxide or nitrogen dioxides, they react in our atmosphere, and then they actually get converted to PM 2.5, which we call as secondary PM 2.5. So you emit them in form of gas, but then they get converted and then add. And this is why, again, when you talk about air quality management, often we have seen that there are a lot of efforts to control those primary pollutants, not realizing that almost 40% or maybe more than that is actually the secondary pollutant, secondary PM 2.5, which is actually emitted in gaseous forms.
So we're talking fossil fuel emissions, we're talking about vehicle usage,
Yes.
I'm guessing transportation.
Also
old
Industrial,
two-wheelers.
Biomass burning.
Biomass burning is
burning.
a huge thing. When you're burning waste, you're burning, or even the wood and coal, when the underprivileged are burning, and they're, all this in the winter also it increases.
Brick kilns, another
Brick
very
kilns,
classic
exactly.
source in India, particularly in this part of
Waste
the...
to energy plants, that's considered green, talking sustainability. So these are the green washing ways of, so big time.
The big problem is, like, when you talk about industrial emissions, we have rules and regulations for emission control management, right? Even our thermal power plants, that there's been a ruling from the Supreme Court for desulfurization, plants for emission control, but they keep pushing the dates. It's like, let everybody get a tumor or cancer, and then we'll, draw the
2017
line.
that's being...
Like, it makes no sense. I mean, and as far as the unorganized sector is concerned, the medium or the smaller scale industry, you're already seeing all our rivers are, all sewage is flowing into our rivers. I mean, there's no river left now, near any urban setting. There's sewers at best, and the air is toxic everywhere.
You mentioned the air that we're breathing indoors as well. You said, because people assume if I'm inside my house, I'm okay. I'm not breathing in the air that's bad, that's outdoors.
Yeah.
What is indoor air pollution, and how does that compare to me breathing in the air outside?
I think something that we don't, even when we're talking about AQI, right? PM 2.5, PM 10 are key contributors, but then there's also nitrogen dioxide, there's also sulfur dioxide, and there's also VOCs, which may not feature, not all of them will feature on your AQI scale conventionally, but VOCs, which is volatile organic compounds, constitute a large part of indoor air pollution. And in the urban
paints
context, that
also.
could be anything like your paints or any toxic chemicals that you may have exposure to. But in the rural setting, household air pollution can come from kerosene, it can come from wood, that forest wood that you're using to sort of burn your chula. So indoor air pollution is as much of a problem, if not a larger problem actually, because people think behind closed doors and closed windows you're safer. But that's not true, because I mean, look at any door in the room, you'll always see there's a gap beneath it. And unfortunately, wood does not insulate air, and we're all breathing that air.
Burning chulha, isn't that what most people use to cook food in rural India?
Yeah, I mean, 2 points here. So those households where, in chula people are using this either kerosene or solid biomass, the pollution level is at least 3 to 5 times higher than the pollution level that you see in Delhi's air. Number one, when you actually generate that pollution indoor, eventually that smoke comes out. And we have found that from our research, almost 30% of the outdoor air on an average for the whole country is actually coming from this solid biomass. And it means that targeting that single source can actually reduce outdoor air pollution as well. The second important point, as he mentioned, also like these volatile organic compounds, which are anyway, highly toxic in nature. Any urban households where usually we think that if you are using LPG, it's safe. Yes, LPG does not directly emit, but in general in urban households, indoor also the pollution level is almost at par with the outdoor. And that is not, just, we have actually the data to show this.
What's the cleanest way of cooking? If we
No,
don't
cleanest way obviously is using LPG or even
LPG,
solar
for India it is
cooking,
LPG.
but
Or
it's
solar
not
now, they're
cooking. But
talking
then
about it's not
what happens, what he also mentions, like the air always comes. We really do not have insulated houses.
Also, we because when we say we are only thinking about ourselves, but the masses are not like that. They're living, 6 people are living in that one 6x6 room, and it doesn't have ventilation. So whatever you're cooking, you're there, your children are sitting with you, your family, your elders, everybody is there at that point. Because we did many studies, and we've been trying to, even to kind of learn as mothers, because we are not experts, but we are of course learning from, the experts, and then we're going on the ground to actually, advocate that even with the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, the people are not willing to now, because the cylinders are very expensive and they don't refill. So you have to kind of tell them that this is a small price with your health, which is much more. You'll pay for the 1100 rupees that you'll save, you'll be spending 15,000 rupees for your health issues.
And two more common sources of indoor air pollution, particularly in the urban households, are actually your mosquito coils, which is
Of course.
frequently used, and then
Mosquito
agarbatti.
coils.
Yes, if you burn them
agarbattis.
and then
Anything you combust, whether it's
any
a
who combust.
agarbatti, a mosquito. So, let me give you a comprehensive answer for indoor air quality. We have over time, as developers or as people who build homes, we have veered towards materials that are low cost. Okay. And we, in kind of looking at the economic cost, we've kind of ignored the health cost. So all of the materials that we are using today to build our homes is toxic. Okay, there's a huge health cost of going towards low cost homes. So in an indoor environment, whatever's outside is inside, right? The greatest source of emissions inside a home is definitely the kitchen. We have agarbattis and mosquito coils, or whatever, all out, and all those
What
things
about
that we use.
candles?
Everything that
Candles,
combusts
absolutely,
is
big time.
horrible. Horrible. I
Big
mean, it's
time.
petroleum, right?
And
What is
you-
a candle
exactly,
made
I
from?
was just going to say it's fossil fuels.
It's
You're
fossil
actually
fuel.
burning,
You're burning
fossil fuel inside your house.
No, but let me tell you more. Like this table that's lying here, everything that we're sitting on, everything off gases, all the polish, varnish, adhesives, the panels that are stuck, the tiles that you stick, everything is made with adhesives that has like benzene and formaldehyde, highly, highly toxic. So in an urban setting now, because it's too cold or it's too hot or there's mosquitoes or there's air pollution, you don't open your doors and windows. So you are like a sitting duck in a home that's off-gassing all the time. And at higher temperatures, there's a greater off-gassing. So, essentially without filtered ventilation, you're a sitting duck in an urban home. Then you've got the problem of your kitchen being a huge source of pollution, and if you exhaust that kitchen, then ambient air, you're putting that stuff out. There are regulations in developed countries, and there should be one in our country as well. Commercial kitchens cannot just exhaust their smoke. They have to have ESP filters, electrostatic precipitators, that filter the air before it goes out. When you go into a rural environment, those homes are fortunately very well ventilated, but then the lady of the house in most cases is doing open chula cooking indoors in most cases. So you're
takes
talking
away.
about like an enormous problem in rural India, because the children are playing around, the mother is kind of indoors to a large extent, and I mean the PM 2.5
It
levels
is
will be
very
over
heartbreaking
1,000.
actually to see them cook, and because now when you see the science, like we also, for us, like reading what Dr. Day will show is one thing. When you go on the ground and you want to, so as mothers, when you're doing a survey, you're not like the regular people who are going and doing this. So we went back and we came back, and the mothers were so disturbed. They had little babies and toddlers and sitting there and doing now. Obviously, it'll take long before they come to LPG or they get the clean cooking. So what do? So we started creating these little play areas outside, that common areas, because the daily wage workers usually are cooking between only in 5 to 7 in the evening. So the children can just come there and just do their thing and color and paint, so they can be at least out from those rooms. I mean, things like that. But then that's what it is. You cannot escape air pollution, and the one that of course you need to understand. So we are talking about the underprivileged, who have so much more problems that they doesn't come in their worries. It's difficult to kind of make them understand. And the elite thinks they can buy everything, so they think by putting an air purifier everywhere, it's going to get them clean air. It's not. So there's no compensation for clean air. That's what it is. I mean, it's very important that the audiences hear this, and we want people to speak up, citizens to demand clean air, because that is the only way this is going to become an electoral agenda, and only then we will find clean air. We can keep saying this for the rest of our lives, which we are.
I just wanted to introduce one kind of indoor air pollutant that doesn't get spoken of very often, and I think this is the elephant in the room because it's a really big one for indoor air quality. It's carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
When you have 8 people or 9 people in this room who are breathing, with every breath, the oxygen levels in this room are going down and the carbon dioxide levels are going up. Okay. And, during the summertime, when you sleep in a room with a split AC, that is only taking air in and throwing it out at a desired temperature. It's not adding any ventilation to the room. And obviously, for a split AC to work, you have to shut your doors and windows, right? So, I did many experiments in my bedroom. When I go to bed and turn on my AC in the evening, the CO2 levels are about 600, 700 parts per million. And when I wake up, it's like over 2,000. And the safe level is under 800. Ideally, for you to be healthy, the CO2 level, carbon dioxide level, and this is a biological process, right? So if you're sleeping with a partner, there's a dog in the room or a child, your levels, and this is a huge problem in schools. Imagine 40 children in a closed classroom with a split AC, or in the winter time with an air purifier, and this is what we are doing to our children in Delhi. And I'm sure the rest of the country is going to follow once they hear this podcast and dial in that this is a all India problem. It's not just a Delhi problem.
So be single and sleep alone.
No, get rid of, these are flawed technologies. We need to get rid of, technologies that kill. Again, the healthcare cost of a split AC, there are better technologies. It's just that we need to, we've kind of made this viable and affordable. We need to invest in better
But if you remember the old homes, you wouldn't have seen it.
Window
but
ACs.
when we grew up,
window ACs were
no,
a
even
much better option.
Going beyond that, I don't know, Jay, if you've been, because families and grandparents and this, when they were going, when the villages and all, we had these, ventilators on the top. That's what. So it's
Like
that's
Khaski
it.
Jalis and all that. No, but you can't even do that anymore.
No, you
right?
can't do that with the ACs now. You can't do it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we've come to ACs because obviously what we've ruined everything.
Now we're going into creating heat islands and the concretization of our
naturally.
cities.
So
We're going
we're paying a
into other
price for
subjects. You
that.
can't open your windows anymore. That's not an option.
So overwhelmed by this information, especially indoor air pollution. So I do just want to tackle that. As someone who lives in an urban environment, who lives in a metropolitan city, what do I do? Whether that's in terms of cooking, whether that's in terms of having a better air purifying system, what can someone do to improve indoor air quality. Agarbattis, it's a daily ritual. I think anyone who prays in the morning, whoever does artis, we always have a diya lit or we have, agarbattis. Candles have become such a vibe creator. You always have soy-based candles now, not even we spoke about petroleum-based, but clean soy-based candles. But I'm guessing even that
nothing is
contributes
clean.
to
Anything that burns
indoor air
cannot be clean.
Anything
pollution.
that combusts, anything that burns is a no-no.
Yes, and we spoke about air conditioners.
In an indoor environment, because all of that stuff is just collecting in the form of black carbon inside your lungs. And this is a filter you can't clean. Okay. Towards your question, what do we do indoors? I mean, there are some best practices. Take your shoes off outside your home because you don't want to, bring stuff in. For me, because I'm asthmatic, when I wear like woolen clothing and stuff, when I get home, somebody in my home will kind of jhado it outside because this also collects PM 2.5, right? So brush off your clothing or whatever before you come into the house. Heavy drapes, heavy blankets, heavy cushions, all of them, carpets, horrible. I'm asthmatic. All of those things are horrible in an indoor environment. So you're talking about minimalistic stuff. Of course, your greatest source of air pollution in your home is your kitchen because we do tadkas and we fry and we make parothas and everything creates a lot of particulate matter and also oil-based particles. So you need to either have the kitchen away from the home or you have to have it really well exhausted. There are many kind of tech solutions. I mean, I use something in my bedroom because I'm very particular, being asthmatic. I'm almost using a mechanical window that brings air into my room at a replacement rate that replaces carbon dioxide faster than I created. I'm filtering air through a HEPA and a gas filter. So I'm removing nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, PM 2.5, PM 10, everything. And if I could show you a picture of that filter, within 15 days, it goes from white to black. I mean, it's horrible. That's what your lungs look like. And that's what our lungs look like. But that's what I'm using. Filtered ventilation is the best solution in an indoor environment, and this is extremely important, especially in like meeting rooms and boardrooms and your bedrooms where you're resting. When we talk about AQI in an indoor environment, it needs to include carbon dioxide. Because if children are studying in a classroom in a closed environment, 30, 40, 20, whatever the number of children is with high levels of carbon dioxide, it will impact productivity and performance. And there are many Harvard and other school studies on this. In fact, I'm on the task force for one of the leading schools of Delhi. We have created 4 classrooms for children of grade 9, 10th, 11th, and 12th, because those are the grades where your exams get you into college, where we have engineered that this CO2 levels are maintained under 800 parts per million.
How do you do that?
Filtered ventilation.
Okay.
So CO2 management is very, very important in an indoor environment. Of course, VOCs, PM 2.5, everything is hazardous. But the moment you create kind of this positive pressure and filtered ventilation, you solve all those problems.
What about paints?
What about?
What about paints?
Paints.
That we use.
Toxic. Sorry, we didn't mention paints, but varnishes, polishes, paints, everything is toxic.
Yeah.
Everything off gases, and it off gases for 50 years. It's not like it's a new home. Of course, when it's new, it off gases more. But at higher temperatures in the summertime, the off gassing is like exponential.
If you keep your heaters next to a wall which has been painted or next to a piece of furniture which has been polished, you can actually smell the chemicals coming off of that. And I think to your question, in terms of what can be done, kitchens, I think in the rural context, of course, it would be LPG. Solar cookers are becoming popular. A lot of non-profits are giving that in rural settings. But again, it's not a perfect solution because I think context also matters. For your average tribal community who's cooking meat or fish, solar cookers may not get you that level of heat required, to sustain their diet. So in the meantime, that's there. And in the urban setting, I think air purifiers, but again, it's a conversation of privilege, right? We are lucky that we can have all of these things or some of these things in our households. To have that space to take off your shoes or to have someone, clean your clothes, all of those things, right? It's good for those of us who can do it, but for the majority,
Yeah,
they can't.
exactly.
Yeah.
None of this works in the larger context. It's
Yeah.
not valid at all. Where they know carbon dioxide or what they know way to measure. They don't know they have a lifestyle that just is about surviving. Something that we say that when you also, like I said, it's difficult because when we, when at that stage you have to compare health or food, because in the evening whether you want food for your children or this health, you'll choose food. There is no choice about it.
Yeah, so
It's
towards
something,
that
so,
point,
yeah.
I this is the big problem of India,
Yeah.
right? The rich are buying their way out of the problem, and the poor don't care about health and environment because it's more, roti, kapra, and
Survival.
makan.
Not a
And that's why this is not being addressed.
Yeah.
So I will just add that one important, I think, interesting thing, for the audience, the CO2 problem in indoor. There is actually an interesting name to that, Sikh building syndrome.
What?
Sick building syndrome.
Sick
syndrome.
building syndrome. What is that?
SBS.
No, this is basically this carbon dioxide buildup in indoor environment leading
You'll
to
get
productivity
headaches,
loss
you'll
and
get
eventually.
allergies. It's called sick building syndrome. It's a
But then coming back to this rural biomass or even in urban slums
Urban
and all
slums,
also,
yeah, more than
I think we have already made the investment of providing LPG connections. So today, if you see the numbers, almost 99.5% households have connections, but effectively, I think mid 60, 64, 65% households are using LPG. Rest cannot afford it. And I think if we can really make that effort to, for those 35% households, sustainably using LPGs, I think, targeting that particular sector will definitely resolve your indoor air pollutions as
And
well
also
as
the
in a big way
ambient-
the outdoor air
Yeah,
pollution in those areas.
exactly.
Isn't that increasing the use of fossil fuels
No.
over time?
So yes, LPG is a fossil fuel.
Yeah,
You're
we said
right.
the LPG.
Yeah,
But
I didn't
it-
realize
it's
that. Yeah.
it's a
We
cleaner
don't have a
fossil fuel
fuel
than
than
biomass,
biomass,
than wood
than
or
coal and
cow
those.
dung.
So LPG
Lesser
is
of
still
many
preferred
evils.
over biomass.
Yeah,
It's
so
not
it's
the
a
cleanest.
lesser evil. It's a lesser evil. Let's leave
Like
it
if
at
you
that.
go into Europe, they still think it's fossil fuel and
Yeah.
Yeah, like our move to CNG for even vehicular,
Even that is,
it's still a fossil fuel, and I think it's a lot more dangerous because the particles.
What about electric stoves that we have?
No,
abroad
definitely,
that
I think that's a
haven't started
problem. But
making?
again, you have to realize.
Electric
Electric
stoves,
is
induction,
still-
you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
the
I meant
source is still,
induction.
the source itself is coal for electricity right now.
Same with
So-
electric vehicles, right? A lot of our power,
Charged by
majority
fossil
of our
fuels.
But I'm
electricity
sure-
is coming from fossil fuels.
Yeah, but I think
No,
Dr. Day should explain this. There's a comparison in the whether the
Yeah.
emissions.
No, I mean,
and
yes,
the other
I
thing.
want to hear his
Yeah,
answer,
I
and
would
then
love to
I'll
also because I
dovetail
know
with him. Yeah,
he'll
yeah,
only do
yeah.
justice to that. I won't come into
Definitely,
it.
see, the one point obviously is that we need to increase our share of renewable energy. No doubt about it. We are still relying mostly on coal. Roughly 70%. Although, overall production of solar and other renewable energy is increasing, but because the population is increasing, almost at the comparable rate, I don't think we are really going going above that mark required. Having said that, and also there is another important thing. Recently, one of my former students, his whole PhD is on that. He tried to understand how air pollution impacts solar renewable energy potential in the country, and you will not believe it that
Yeah,
India has lost 30% of utilizable solar energy because of air pollution. Why? Because these particles, they cut down the solar radiation.
Yeah.
That
reduce the
are
yields.
supposed to reach the panel, and when this particle gets deposited also, if you do not clean it,
It affects.
then that also reduces the panel efficiency. And what is found is that you need to actually clean, particularly if I'm talking about Delhi, twice a week,
Yeah.
to make sure that panel efficiency remains intact, and that adds to the cost. And also it's a circular, and if you clean air, then there will be much surplus solar energy. So that's one argument. But this, coming back to your original question, is that yes, we need to really go to use of solar energy. I think what Abhiir was also mentioning that yes, electric vehicle, even I drive also electric vehicle, but it's mostly the
Powered by
power
coal.
is coming from. But overall, if you do the calculation, yes, that is much better than using an IC engine vehicles. In Delhi, we made all the rules of. We already leapfrog to BS6 so that your emission per unit distance traveled is much lower. But again, what happened, and recently this new guidelines or rather directive came that I think after March 31st, no 15-year-old
Yes,
vehicle
no 15 year
will
old
get.
vehicles, yeah. Petrol now.
Many people are kind of now discussing whether it's too harsh, but my argument is always that you have to take strict decisions if you are really sure. There has to be, nothing comes free.
Yeah.
And I don't think, because we already have the rules of 15-year vehicles banned and all, but if you again see, for example, these vehicles are not really off-road. Yes, they are banned in Delhi, so they are not really plying in Delhi, but they are plying somewhere else in Dehradun or
But
God
would
knows
you
where.
agree with that policy of 15 years? I mean, is there a 15-year threshold?
See,
Is that correct?
there are, I mean, 15-year threshold comes from the fact that yes, your emission factor really increases. But my argument is that rather than having a blanket 15-year target, because if you compare now a private vehicle with commercial vehicle,
Yes.
the commercial vehicles are even worse. Actually, even in 6
Yes,
years,
they are the same.
their emission factor is actually a 15-year-old private vehicles.
Yeah.
So those things probably,
Even two-wheelers,
can
I
be.
imagine.
Yeah,
Two-wheelers
two-wheelers
is
are
a
also
big,
big
Worse than
contributor.
cars.
Worse actually.
And nobody is talking about that. in the
But
policy.
again, because it's mostly the middle class or
Yeah.
probably the
Vote bank.
lower economic and poor people, they use mostly the two-wheelers. So again, that's a major challenge. But if you go to any tier 2, tier 3 cities, actually it's overwhelmingly two-wheelers
Yeah.
Yeah,
that contributes.
it is.
So unless we really have public system, public transport rather, So again, here is a catch. When we talk about public transport, yes, people talk about metro and all, but you need, all of this in an integrated way. It cannot be just metro. It cannot be just buses and all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. I want to take 2 steps back to actually the causes, because I think we briefly touched upon how fossil fuel combustion is a big part of it. Some people think it is topography. Some people think it is crop burning, but that's seasonal. Some people think, again, Diwali fireworks, whatnot. What are the main causes of air pollution? If you had to boil it down to top 5 or top 10 reasons that we have such high levels of air pollution, what would those be?
See, as I said, if you're talking about urban air pollution, so any city you go, without doing any studies, you can pick up some of the sources. Transport definitely will be one. Okay. There will be construction and road dust. And then you can have actually waste burning, which is a very big source in many of the urban areas.
Industrial emissions.
Industrial emissions is there, and then outside the cities you have brick lanes, you have this open biomass burning, and then also, as I mentioned, this residential is a big source. So there are these common sources. Okay, now what we really need, and in fact in our national clean air program, by the way, for each and every sources there is clear mandate what
Absolutely.
needs to be done.
That's what the
What
the
is
catch.
not happening, if you read actually those on pen and paper, it's everything is there. What is not happening is a proper implementation of those plans or strategies. There are two reasons why. One is that there is no accountability. If something is not done, whom to hold accountable? There is no one. You can simply say that it is too. And again, when you also look into the studies, and you mentioned stubble burning, because typically, this Delhi's air pollution, particularly during October, November, all the debate, everything is around stubble burning. Yes, during that time, stubble burning contributes maybe around 15 to 20%. But on an annual scale, how much stubble burning contributes to Delhi's air pollution? Maybe 5 or 6%.
Not even.
If you
Not
think
even that.
about
So
it,
what happened? What? So transport is a very big source.
And
So-
if you think about it, the Kharif season agriculturally, traditionally, is about 27 days, right? But you will see that air pollution is spoken about extensively in Delhi between October till, say, February. because during those months, that's when you can actually see it. It's not that air pollution is not there in the summer. It's just that between October to February, you can see it, you can smell it a lot more than you can in the summer, right? And the poor farmers are the ones who get burned, even though it's not their fault, right? Because it's just, even if you say it's 28 days of stubble burning, that's not the primary contributor. It's an exacerbator, perhaps. In the winter, of course, there's meteorological phenomenon. One part is the mountains, the other part is that cold air also traps in that air pollution, right? But those are just, again, amplifiers. The causes remain the same no matter what the weather is. And I think that's the issue, that whether it's vehicular emissions, whether it's all of these other sources we mentioned, the policies are there. We're in a catch-22 where, we're doing a tutu meme. There's this Instagram meme where you have three Spider-Mans pointing at each other. That's literally, the place we're at.
And I think what needs to be done in that, to really address this, last season actually stubble burning was 50% lower. I mean, just a fact for audience. So one is obviously this lack of accountability, but the other point is that we really do not have any interim metrics to assess our progress. So for example, when you say transport is a major sector, and then within transport also you have two-wheelers, four-wheelers, heavy duty vehicles and all, and something is happening. For example, you also have this graded response action plan where you band and all of these things. But the point is that how much success we achieved from doing n number of things, because we are doing things randomly without really having a proper framework to assess. So when you say that, okay, let's ban all the trucks, how much that actually contributed? So we need to really develop those indicators and then say that if that is working, then let's continue that, scale it up. And if this is not working, for example, the one clear example is the smoke tower. Then immediately abandon. In fact, the smoke tower is another
Greenwashing.
example saying that,
But it takes so long,
we
and these
knew,
mistakes cost us our
scientists
lives,
knew that smoke towers will not work,
Yeah.
but anyway, it was put there, but eventually now, and thankfully, actually, it's not continuing. But similarly, there are many other things. Like you must have seen all these water sprinklings. There are no evidence that,
No, I'll tell you the evidence, because I have done a lot of work on this. On rain, which is kind of like what it does. We're getting into a lot of minutia, and let me finish this, but I want to take it to a macro level of what are the causes.
No, so what I was saying-
on the smog thing, I don't know if you've seen them, but in our cities now, you have these smog guns on the back of these vehicles that are diesel commercial vehicles that emit PM 2.5. And the only thing those smog guns do is settle PM10. So you're settling PM10 and increasing PM 2.5. So it's completely counter. It's again, smog wash, green wash, whatever you want to call it. But I want to go to the macro levels of air pollution. Okay, if you look at the whole planet, okay, and countries that have air pollution problems, they have a few things in common. And I want to talk about those things because those are the primary drivers of air pollution, not just in India, but across the world. First one being poverty, okay? Where you have poverty and poor people burn biomass to cook their food and to stay warm in the winter time, okay? So the first driver of air pollution at a macro level is poverty, okay? So we need to bring clean fuels for cooking and to stay warm to poor people, okay? Number
'Cause
two,
they contribute to it the least, right? But
no,
they're the
their
ones-
carbon footprint is the lowest. But if you talk about winter time, biomass burning to cook or to stay warm, if the temperatures are low, we have something called cold air inversion where the pollutants will not disperse, right? So you must have heard that, Delhi's stuck in a gas chamber.
Yeah, but
It's
you
not
cannot
just
match
Delhi.
that to the thermal power plant or the waste to energy plants or whatever.
Everything,
it's not,
right?
The violations are huge.
Yeah,
We cannot, I think, compare with this.
Yeah.
It is important. Every source of pollution has to be. I mean, I don't understand this logic of fighting, among citizens. Also, always these arguments of which is more and less. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
But it cannot be the most. I'm sure about that.
Let
yeah.
me just finish.
Yeah.
So the second thing in common, if you look at countries around the world that have an air pollution problem, is illiteracy, right? So the way you beat this is through knowledge and information, right? The way you beat this is by changing human behavior, right? That's what I said. Awareness precedes change. We've been part of creating awareness for 10 years. We haven't managed to change behavior. Why? It's an illiteracy problem. People don't know how to process knowledge and information for their own good. It's a quality of life issue. How people don't care about it. When I started as an activist in 2014, I thought every mother of this city, every parent of this city would be standing by my side and saying, we want change. Nothing. I mean, we are here 11 years later, nothing.
I don't know what is the excuse for the literates to not bother. Illiteracy is one thing, but I don't know who are reading, who have Google, and who are just saying everything.
Desensitization, right? Like the problem seems so much. It is indifference. So it's saying it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
We're all gonna die, and as the way social media is today, everything is bad for you, right?
Like Jay is saying, the social change. Yes, it's very important, because if the government will work on poverty and empower, strengthen the community, these things will become better and lesser.
We can talk about what government should do. My third thing.
That's policy
cause,
in government, definitely.
The third cause, and I think this is a big one, right, is urbanization, unmanaged urbanization. There are no opportunities and no jobs in rural India. Okay, if you go to our villages, there are just old people. The men keep smoking bidis and the women keep sitting around because the children have all left for the cities. Now, the government is heavily focused on smart cities. Unless we create opportunities in rural India, our cities don't stand a chance, right? You cannot, there's a holding capacity of a Delhi or a Bombay or a Pune. Once you exceed that holding capacity, then you've got untreated feces and urine going into your rivers. Then you've got, the whole carbon cycle is upset, right? And we've upset that carbon cycle in every city. So forget about smart cities. Your cities will never become smart. Okay, we'll always be behind the ball if 10,000 people are coming from villages to Delhi every day, or whatever that number is, right? But we need to create opportunities in rural India. And that's leadership, that's governance. That's what I want to see out of my government, is a vibrant village program. And identifying what are the nuances or the USPs of these villages or these regional areas, and focusing on that rather than bringing everybody to Delhi or a Bombay or a Kolkata, which is what's happening today. And unless we stop that, I don't think any of us, we will keep talking for the rest of our life, and this problem will never get resolved in our lifetime. I'm certain of it.
Yeah, I think a city exodus, like just people leaving urban cities to move to rural.
And let me give you a great example of what China did. Leading, this is leadership. This is good governance. They said, okay, Beijing is our worst city. It's the capital. It's a source of shame for our country that our capital has the worst air quality. It used to be before 2015, the worst city in the world. They moved the central government out of Beijing.
Yeah, that's exactly. And we were
They
bringing
said
offices
2 million
there.
people don't need to live in Beijing. Let's just move the central government. And what did our government do? They built Central Vista. जो पेड़ बचे थे वो भी काट
The
दिए.
World Trade Center, and you're bringing
जो
in
पेड़
another
बचे
wing.
थे दिल्ली में वो भी काट दिए.
Yeah.
How much we fought. Our children hugged trees in the heart of Delhi while these guys came to knock these 80 to 100-year-old trees. We went to court. We got a stay. The judge in the court who stayed the chopping of trees, she was transferred to Kashmir. I mean, what do we do?
That brings me to this question: is air pollution political?
Definitely. I mean, and there is no political will to work on it. So that is why I'm just, before that, I want to come to Dr. Dey when he said that no accountability. It's very important to know what happens on the ground, and that's the reason. So now when you have a mandate, you have everything written there, their compliances on a daily basis. I mean, you've taken my phone, so I could show you threads which are like 2-year-old of the same citizens showing that same neighbor industry that is emitting smoke day and night with Google locations, with time, everything, or areas which is also NCR. It's not only Delhi, NCR. I mean, it's Noida and Ghaziabad and Gurugram. Waste burning, the same waste burning in front of a very strong voice in Gurugram, Ruchika,
Yeah.
and her neighbor, and she has a child who's special and difficult, and now her husband's battling kidney, and she's so sure because she's fighting this for years, and she says it's burning right behind my house, and how much complaint. Now this is where the problem is on the ground. There is no what you're saying, no accountability. There is absolutely nobody is taking action when these complaints are being taken into courts, and when you're taking them into contempt cases, etc. The judiciary is so kind to everyone until the officers and these people responsible will not go to jail, the violators. Nothing's going to change. Penalizing is like the best thing that happens to them. So this is where I think everyone will need to change, because anybody who feels for yourself, your health, your children, forget the other children, your own children, then this is the move that is going to be, because now it's done. Like he said, we're losing our patience. He's saying a decade. I'm fighting this over 2 decades.
I've resigned.
We're just
I've
too
resigned.
much of this, because we cannot keep saying the same things again and again, while on the ground, this is the reality. That one thing is okay. Every government does everything for development, and they see their own interests. But when there is violation that's being reported, there is no question of not looking. So that is the reason we reach GRAP. If you are looking at these, now I say in the last 2 months, there's so much violation reported. Why isn't it being checked? Because so that's what causes and brings us to that stage of GRAP. Because the emissions will continue to increase, and if these violations are not checked, whether it's your
just
Yamuna.
mentioned what GRAP is, because I don't think her audience will probably know
Yeah,
what GRAP is.
So graded response action plan that was formed. I think Dr. Day should do that. I feel terrible
Sure.
talking
I
about
think,
he should
No, I mean,
do the
yeah. So this
technical-
graded response action plan was formed to, streamline this mitigation measures. For example, when your AQI exceeds certain range, then you implement immediate measures. It was successful elsewhere,
Yeah,
and I think that's really a good plan, so that you really don't go after everything. And when you are, for example, in extreme or hazardous levels, then you sort of shut down construction activities and all of this. So there is a very clear-cut plan. But again, when you have that plan, when that plan is implemented now by Commission on Air Quality, which is basically this body, apex body, which is overseeing all the states that belong to NCR, because we know that it's a kind of a regional problem and all. Everything is good again on
on
pen and
pa-
paper, but then when
and
it
also
comes
GRAP
to
has become like a celebration. It's like an excitement that GRAP 1, 2. That's not the point.
but
The
there are
government should
many,
be
yes.
ashamed
So
that you're going
just
to GRAP.
two more
So,
points I want to add. Again, when there has been a lot of arguments that when the schools are shut and all, so there is actually negative consequences, and it's not like that by shutting down schools we are actually protecting our children, because they are anyway they're playing outside in their home and all.
Yeah.
So we need to really keep in mind all of these nuances. But I wanted to highlight, when you talk about air pollutions being anti-development, I think this is a very wrong perception. If at all, whatever we have learned from developed countries, that when you actually clean our air, it accelerates economic growth. There are evidences from US, Europe, even in
China, yeah.
Mexico, yes.
Great example.
Just to give you the number, that based on the analysis done by the Global Burden of Disease Study India group led by ICMR, because of air pollution, India is losing 1.36% of its GDP, and that's a massive number.
We're losing GDP because of air pollution.
Yeah, I mean, the economic loss is equivalent to 1.36% of India's GDP, and that's a massive number, obviously. Because just for one sector. Why there is a loss? Obviously, because people are dying
Healthcare
prematurely.
costs,
There is actually massive healthcare cost,
loss of productivity.
and all of this. And
School closure is a big thing. I mean,
Yes.
it completely disrupts family life. It's like there's a discipline, right? There's Monday, from Monday to Friday,
Yeah, there's a routine.
the whole family is on a schedule. And suddenly it's like air pollution, schools shut down, parents don't know what to do with the children. I mean,
And also it's been
And
challenging.
it does not
you know,
help actually.
like-
That's the main point.
like my daughters were playing basketball and at the junior national, and I was fighting constantly. I was the only parent in those years. They're now 21, they're twin girls, and I was fighting because they were made to practice at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the PM 2.5 was like over 300. And what do they understand? No, I said move the practice timings to post school, but obviously it's not easy to fight that. So I had to keep them away from practice. So like I had two teenagers fighting against me, because obviously now if they don't practice, they will not make it to the team, and it's very difficult to fight that. So this is what happens, that you will lose out on your sports careers, you will lose out on your
Social
achievements. Play is
academic
so
careers
important
as well. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
If you're not going to school for like 10 days in October or
Yeah.
November or even greater, it's a problem. And I have an asthmatic child who misses about probably 30 to 40 days of school from November to January. So your academic goals go for a toss.
Absolutely.
So sorry, Dr. Dey.
No. I think that's absolutely, that is my point actually, that, the action plans that we try to implement, we need to really think about all of these practical issues.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point that, there has been enough now voice to suggest that don't shut down the schools. But coming back to the point, I think once people, Bhavreen and Jay, you have been talking that you have been fighting this battle. I'm a scientist. We provide evidence and all.
That's
but
what we use.
but the point I'm trying to say is that I
voice to
think
us.
there is not enough awareness even within Delhi.
Yeah, true.
And when you think about the overall effect of air pollution, it's not, as I mentioned earlier, that not on respiratory problem. It starts from the day the mother conceives.
Yeah.
Then there is a negative impact, higher risk of preterm birth, stillbirth, even the baby is
birth
born,
weight. Yeah,
the chance of low birth weight, developmental failures like stunting, wasting, anemia, for example, cognitive decline.
Alzheimer's as well.
No, and then Alzheimer's and all, it's a long chronic process. And then you have acute respiratory infections, many other diseases when the child becomes an adult. Then you have also, all sorts of non-communicable diseases like heart disease, respiratory disease, diabetes,
hypertension.
Diabetes is
hypertension,
linked
and
to air
everything.
pollution?
Yes.
Yeah, very much. All
Leading
studies.
leading cause of
Everything
heart
is-
disease and diabetes.
everything.
Is
And in
pollution.
fact, there are studies, again,
Lung cancer being
where
the
we-
most obvious of them, I imagine.
Lung cancer is there, but if you see the
COPD.
total, if you do a kind of ranking, air pollution's affecting, what type of diseases, number one is cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
Not respiratory or lung
And all
cancer.
these crazy heart attacks that you're seeing now, and now the doctors and scientists are coming and saying this. So it's not like, citizens are talking, it's evidence based.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there are
but-
studies done. That's what I'm saying. It's not mathematical modeling. There are more than 40 studies done with Indian data, because earlier the argument was that, these are all global studies. Some function has been used, but now there are more than 40 studies with Indian health data, with Indian exposure and pollution data and all to demonstrate all of these impacts.
Yeah.
I think
But
Abhiir-
before we move to, the health implications, I want to use this to segue to two things. One is to get back to your question on the political angle. But before that, I think a big problem goes back to what I was saying earlier about it being a slow burn, right? People aren't realizing. I'm not taking away from the gravity and the seriousness of all of these diseases. We suffer from, these diseases. But unfortunately, as trivial as it sounds, and I interact with school students when I do these workshops and talks, it's surprising that when I'm talking to school students or even college students, for them, they are more concerned if I tell them that air pollution is giving you acne or white hair than about lung cancer or COPD or any of that.
Yeah.
So well said.
But
Yeah.
and what is interesting there is that fine, you have to capitalize from a marketing perspective, not to make this a business thing, but from a behavior change communication perspective, that's a better way to put it. You have to change the message to the audience, right? So if you're talking to students,
We've been on the wrong track for so long.
if
You should have been talking about acne. The
ago.
whole time you should have been talking about acne
if you're
and white
talking
hair.
to students, if you're talking to, I'm talking to my friends, they
Dr.
are
Day is in the
concerned,
new
ki, Arey,
research
how would
today.
I go to...
Dr. Day, like, says, stand up,
I'm going to work on this.
I should have been talking about white hair this whole
Yeah,
time.
and there are
not-
enough studies for this. I'm not pulling this out of thin
No,
air either.
makes
No,
but
no,
my best friend is more concerned about how can I have 2 blemishes on my face on Friday night if I have to go for that party, right? So that's point number 1, changing communication, right? Point number 2, going back to the political angle of it, and I'll take 2 minutes here, right? I think there is politicization, but it's not productive, right? I can tell you there are enough of these residents' welfare association groups. I stay in Vasant Vihar. My mom is in these groups which go on and on about God knows what. And, and it's ironic because our own didis and bhaiyas are the ones sometimes lighting fires outside the door, right? So one is local accountability also needs to be politicized or, society-wise held accountable, number 1. Number 2, you look at any debate, I mean, we've been on so many of these, NDTV, Times Now, Falana, Dhimkana, all of them have the same debate, causes, consequences, implications. It's the first time in 60 years, that the 3 or 4 governments in and around Delhi are all held by the same party. So it's going to be interesting to see if that manages to bring about some change, right? Because so far it's been Punjab mein ye government hai, Haryana mein ye government hai, all of those things, right? Thirdly, the scope of the debate politically is limited to that same time period, September to February, broadly speaking, right? Now, conversely, what if I put forward a proposition, right? Let's use an example. And this example applies not just to firecrackers, but even to your pollution check certificates, any other day-to-day enforceable sort of air pollution metric, right? When we're talking about the firecracker ban, which has been there, right? NGT, Supreme Court, everyone has banned it. 2020, Times Now said there were 1,200 cases of firecrackers which were reported to the government. Now, obviously, Diwali ki raat ko, nobody wants to ruin their Tyohar ki raat and complain about this to the police. That's a whole other conversation, right? But 1,200 is a very tiny number. It's a much higher number, goes without saying. What if, hypothetically, let's use that 1,200 as a representative number. What if that 1,200 were to fall to 300, right, over, say, 5 years? If 900 people stop bursting firecrackers, to a rational politician, assuming we live in a world where our politicians are rational, but to a
What world
rational
is that?
politician, that sends a message that those are 900 additional people who perhaps have become more conscious. And if you look at an electoral rally today, you'll hear our politicians talking about, bridges, India, China, India, US, foreign policy. If you're lucky, they'll talk about women's safety, but they're not talking about climate change. India is the world's largest democracy. Until 2019, we did not have the words climate change in the manifestos of the BJP nor the Congress, right? 2024 election, there are 2 pages almost, 2 half pages in the 2 largest parties' manifestos, but they're still not talking about it in their rallies, right? The point that I'm making is if 1,200 falls to 300, hopefully to a rational politician, that would mean that if they start talking about enforcing said firecracker ban or enforcing said 15-year ban on diesel, petrol, whatever, that could possibly mean 900 additional votes for them, right? But that's what society is failing to tap into, right? Today we're in a space where we're saying corporates need to do it, governments need to do it. Government is saying, "Arey, humne to ban introduce kiya hua hai," but society is not following it. So I think 80% of the change has to come from corporates and governments, but the 20% that has to come from society has to be the first 20%. Because we have to demonstrate to our politicians that we care. And until we make it a voting issue, they have zero incentive to talk about it. And only when they talk about it will it be enforced or held accountable, right? Right now, what happens if the incumbent party says we'll make one bridge in 5 years and it takes 7 years, the opposition says, "Are bhai, likha to ye tha, bola to ye tha." But right now, koi bol hi nahi raha hai, right? Nobody is going to an electoral rally. And for the first time in this Delhi election, I saw the Yamuna cleanliness becoming a mainstream political issue, right? So, yeah.
Would you all agree that it's a societal level change that needs to come first before governmental or corporate
Not at
level
all.
change?
Not at all. I mean, it's all right. Kids must talk like that and they must think like that. It doesn't start that way. It begins only. The leaders have to lead. The policies will have to be like that. I cannot come and say I can segregate my waste and give it, but what is your authorities are mixing it and burning it? They want to incinerate it.
What do we do
So-
when the governments and the leaders fail? When the
No,
leaders fail to
just
lead?
say, just think of another model of a Singapore or New York or Sweden. Why do you do all those things over there? Because it's being enforced. The laws, we have fantastic laws. It's not like we don't have laws, but nobody cares about them. They made a big, big joke out of everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
That's-
The
but
system-
that's
that's
what
exactly
I was
what
saying.
I'm
I know,
saying.
that's what I'm
right?
saying. But
When-
so they have to lead and then you have to follow and you will follow because there is no citizens in the world who will want to do things. They're made to do things. Can I park my car somewhere in New York City for 30 seconds also? I'll get a fine. You are idling here, your vehicles are everywhere, everything. I just pointed out, I have hundreds of these complaints of violations. Why are they not being looked into? That is what needs to be. Everything has to start there with the government, their policy, systemic changes, which are absolutely zero here. We are talking about the pollution boards, but we have 50% vacant posts in pollution DPCC right now.
The NCAP
What
fund
are-
goes underutilized. The National
Underutilized.
Clean
So
Air
what are you
Plan
doing?
goes-
Why? Who will go on the ground when we make complaints? Who's going to go? They can barely do probably not even finish their desk jobs. So this is what needs to work. This is the job of a government. They know much more. We are ordinary citizens.
Because as he said, there's a ban on fireworks, but it's not like everyone stopped
Why is it
using
not being enforced?
fireworks.
They
right?
should be. When
It's-
If you go to the cops, they'll tell you, "Arey ma'am, हम 12,000 लोगों को एक रात में थोड़ी ना arrest करें."
Yeah. So they need to be in jail, no? They need to be suspended. They need to be fired. That's what is needed now. I mean, you talk about. I'm sorry, if my child is going to live 12 years less in their lives, I don't care. I am going to fight for this because then there are people responsible for that, and they must be made accountable.
And it's also
There are no
sorry
excuses.
to
I mean, we don't have to be good and always nice and saying those things because they don't work out. That's not
But
the
it's
way it
also
is.
on us, right? I mean, I can tell you I have enough relatives who will be driving a car during Grab 3, which may be BS4, right? Is it and the cop stops you at the Delhi-Gurgaon border. Is it easier to slip the cop a 1,000 rupee note, or is it easier to keep your car off the roads?
Or is it easier not to have a Grab and work all year? Like that's
So
what it is.
I wanna sum it up again, taking it to a macro level of stuff that's worked around the world when governments have led on this issue. Again, the way to kind of handle air pollution or climate change is, social change is behavior change. How do you drive behavior change? So the way governments have done it elsewhere in the world and what's worked is you penalize bad behavior, the polluter, and you incentivize good behavior,
Yes.
right? So it's very small examples of that. If you want to drive your car into central London, there are these things that deduct. We have fast tags in India. They have a similar system where you get clocked a certain amount of money. I don't know what it is,
The
5
low emission
pounds or
zones.
something.
If are you going to have you pay a
going into
huge
central
congestion
London.
and emission tax.
Yeah,
to just
or give you an example of Paris. Once the AQI reaches 150, they ban all diesel vehicles on their roads and they make public transportation free. So these are just very small examples, right? So you to drive behavioral change,
the lead has to be from them.
the lead has to be in government.
He's
and this
right.
is,
You're
this is such
absolutely
an
Abhiir.
easy
What
way.
he's saying is right, but the lead has to come there. I don't have to lead. I'm a citizen. You will have to make me do it.
So
And then
I'll
they
give
have
you a
to lead
small
also.
example, which should have been done already, right? The emission from diesel passenger vehicles is like, 7 to 9x of a petrol vehicle, which is of course still a lot more than an EV vehicle because there's no local emission from a EV vehicle, right? So, I mean, why are we not penalizing people today who are buying diesel cars?
Yeah, it should
or
be so
petrol
expensive,
cars?
tax heavily.
And even for a city like Delhi, which has an air pollution problem, I mean, even an EV car should be a privilege. We should only have shared mobility like an Ola or an Uber. Like, I don't understand what is the need for my vehicle to be parked here for 2 hours while I'm doing this.
Yeah.
It's like Singapore is a perfect example of this.
Yes.
A $50,000 car will cost $200,000 or $250,000 because you don't need a car. Great public transportation, great walking pathways,
needs to come first
great
again.
bicycling, lanes.
Yeah.
You don't.
I've never had to use even a cab in Singapore. I lived there for 6 years. And taxis are like one-off going to the airport.
You know exactly what
type
I'm
of
talking
situation.
about.
Yeah, and I was also going to say the same thing, that when you say about behavioral interventions, see, there are 3 types of interventions: policy interventions, technological interventions, and eventually behavioral interventions. The first 2 directly come under the purview of the government, and obviously technology needs to be developed and all, but this is exactly that you have to provide alternatives to the people.
Absolutely.
And again, stubble burning is another classic example. If you provide solutions to the farmers, there are cases, there are plenty of good cases where it is shown that, they do not burn. They simply burn because there is no alternative available at a feasible cost, because the cost is again important here.
Yeah.
Before any of this, before what we need to do, my number one question is, why should we care? How is this affecting us? We did touch upon health a little bit, but what are the consequences, especially for women and children? We discussed that briefly. Yeah. What are we looking at? What are we sitting on? What is it that we're going to face? And as we said, it's also invisible, so we don't really know how it's fully affecting us. So what do we need to know? What do we need to be wary of? And why should we begin to care?
Well, I'm going to go with Abhiir and say it's going to lead to white hair and acne.
Yeah, that's going to be my
I like his line because whatever I've been saying has not worked in 10 years.
Yeah. No, but on a serious note, I mean, when I was in class 6, I also started my journey gradually about 12, 13 years ago. I was like Donald Trump. I was, at worst, I thought climate change isn't real, and at best, I thought it's not my problem. It was only when my doctor told me that the seasonally recurring bronchitis, allergies, all of that was affecting me, that's when I was like, okay, I want to do something about this, right? So a big part of it is, again, make the message relevant to the audience, right? For the person who cares about their skin, talk to them about that. For me, I don't want to be sneezing and coughing, and I still am 12 years later, but that's what made me aware of it. So for some people, it can be internal health. For some people, it can be superficial health. We also spoke of GDP loss. I think from a macroeconomic perspective, that is a big one. And I mean, we spoke about schools. COVID, why was it such an issue that schools were shut, right? Young kids are losing interpersonal skills. They're losing the ability to socialize. And it's disrupting parents. I mean, in the context of tier 2 cities, or I mean even tier 1 cities, right? Both my parents are working. If I was back in school, where who would I be with if my mom can't go to work between 9 to 5, right? So the implications are circular.
That's what I want to touch upon. I want to touch upon health implications, social implications, economic implications, whatever that is, with a particular focus on how it affects us as individuals.
Actually, when in my class, I always use this example or draw parallel with smoking. And, often, for example, argument is given that, here is the proof that, someone is dying because of air pollution. Yeah. So we need to understand one thing, that air pollution is not the cause. It's a risk factor for many diseases. Now, any person will die from certain disease, right? Same thing for smoking. You cannot say that this single person or this individual has died because of smoking. Right? Because what happens is that someone who is smoking actually, again, is at risk of developing those non-communicable diseases, which ultimately cause the death.
But isn't everyone in India smoking because of the air pollution anyway?
That's the point. So what I'm trying to say is that now when you compare smoking and air pollution, and if you just take a quick survey, you just go anywhere and just ask 10 people, you will mostly find, I think, almost 10 out of 10 believing that smoking is injurious to health.
Yeah.
And now we have all of these things. And even to get to that point, it took more than 30 years.
Yeah.
If you go back to 60s and 70s, people did not believe that smoking causes so much health. But now relentless, campaigning and all.
Yeah.
I think we are actually fighting the same battle for air pollution. But the only difference is that it's exactly what you're saying. The smoking is by choice, but air pollution is not by
Not by
choice.
choice.
Yes. Because even non-smokers are smoking
Yes,
anywhere.
you talk to any doctor. In fact, Dr. Arvind Kumar always,
Yeah.
in his message and all says that nowadays it's all 50-50, smoker, non-smoker. But that is one disease. But then, as I mentioned earlier, also that almost every organ in our body is affected by air pollution, and there is evidence, there is scientific study to mention that.
Yes.
And that's actually, just on a tangential note, that's actually a very important part of the problem also, because what you said earlier, Dr. Day, that there's this book by, I think most of us know her, Jyoti Pandey, Breathing Here is Injurious to Your Health, and she talks about how she lost her mom to lung cancer, and the doctors refused to write that it was lung cancer induced by pollution, right? And that is one very big issue, because how can a doctor, medically speaking, diagnose and say, okay, someone has passed away because of air pollution, right? They'll write COPD, they'll write, I don't know, they'll write whatever, heart attack, they'll write whatever they have to, but there's no linkage being made in that report which is made to air pollution. And that is a big void when it comes to data, when it comes
Admitting.
to sort of communicating that to the government, to the public, to say that, you know what, X number of people have been lost because of
There's only one case in the world. I don't know if you
In the
really,
UK,
in
yeah.
the UK, there's Rosamund. She lost her 9-year-old daughter Ella to she was living in this area which was had much more vehicular pollution, and she's more vulnerable communities who were staying there, and so that's the only death certificate that says in the world the reason of air pollution is death. And now I think after a 12-year-old battle with her, she became one of the most known air pollution advocate, and the mayor and the government has apologized to her, and now after 12 years finally of being in the courts, etc., she's been compensated, and whatever.
I mean, the
and
parents,
an
yeah.
apology,
Yeah,
an
the
apology
parents.
of
Yeah, but
that's a
doesn't
big
bring
thing.
the
So
life back.
So this is
scientifically,
admitting, yeah.
scientifically it is possible.
That's what is
If
fantastic
you
to
do
get that.
If you do autopsy
reel
of
of this,
each
please.
and individual death, and then you obviously need actually history recorded, then looking into the biomarkers and certain other evidence, you can actually say that whatever caused that death, you can attribute to air pollution or smoking or any other risk factor like high blood pressure and other things. It is technically possible, but it's not feasible. Because when you have more, 1.4 billion people, and if you see the numbers that how many deaths are actually medically certified, the number is very low in India. Even in Delhi, I think if I'm not wrong, again I'm just recalling from the statistics. I think in India there is a large variations. Even in Delhi, I think 70% or so deaths are medically certified. The proper, diagnostics and documentation. Because most of the deaths, usually it mentions that's a natural death, not even the reason.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the risk factor, because risk factor is the next level. You have to first establish that what actually
of
caused that death, and then you have to attribute to that risk factor. So even that system is not really
So is it
strong.
that you have to be going to the doctor for a few years and then it should come,
Yeah, I mean,
come and record? That's
and
how-
that is why what we do as scientists is that we generate population scale evidence based on, again, studies, because there are ways to actually say that what is the cause and how much risk you attribute to air pollution and other risk factors. And these studies are being done across the country by different health professionals in collaboration with us, climate and exposure scientists. Many of these studies are actually funded by Indian Council of Medical Research.
Yeah, they do great work.
And that is what I'm saying. But the point is that when it comes to institutionalize the whole process, that's where actually we need massive effort.
Absolutely.
There is, for example, what we could do going forward is that we have this National Family Health Survey where we are collecting information. And there are many such routine surveys. I think we can start adding 1 or 2 key indicators even in our census and many other surveys
Yeah.
to make sure that we capture those information. Because typically what happens is that is the problem of population.
Yeah.
Doctor today does not have enough time to even get the full history.
Yeah.
You go US and any other place, they spend
Very symptomatic.
very systematic. Your previous
Absolutely.
history is already there. They simply just fetch. In any developed countries, I think we are probably years behind of developing that system. But I think that system needs to be developed so that then things will be
So
much.
we've also been writing to
upfront.
ICMR and then also through Lung Care Foundation, Dr. Arvind Kumar, and all asking various doctors that to make this a mandate to actually write on the prescriptions your residence where you live, and like when you write age, name, age, etc., to write where you live and what is the average PM 2.5 there, and also if you're suffering, then they must say that try to leave the city or try to be in an area which is less than this. So
Yeah.
that becomes like a, for diagnosis, it just comes to, steps forward.
Yeah, like how
But
cigarettes
yeah.
come with health warnings.
Yes, health warning.
I think.
It's
And
not even a
cities where you
warning,
live
but
with
please,
high
please
level of
understand
pollution.
that where we live in India, and this is the reason that our exposure levels, we are looking at something that is untested and unprecedented. We're not only talking about high levels of exposure, but we are talking about long-term exposure. Right? The only 2 months in India, no matter where you are, that you get a relief or you get moderate air quality is the monsoon months. But 300 days of the year, you're a sitting duck. With every breath, you're doing harm to yourself. Right? And you asked me, so what does it mean to you, or how does it impact you? It's a quality of life issue. No matter what your goals are, whether it's economic or it's health or academic, you're not going to meet your goals. I mean, that's the bottom line. Whether at an individual level or at a business level or at the level of government, you're not going to meet your goals.
I just want to, just for the audience, also want to mention one important thing, because I hear this argument at many places that, if it's so polluted and we are born in that polluted conditions, really, is it possible that we become immune? And based on my understanding and also what I, discuss and, I get from the doctors actually, that there is no such evidence that anyone becomes resilient or immune to air pollution.
No, so
become
again,
desensitized.
that's why I
These are
mentioned that this is
narratives,
a
yeah.
toxin.
False
You cannot
narratives.
develop, it's like saying, the cobra venom is a toxin, right? You cannot develop immunity to a toxin. You can develop immunity to an allergen. You cannot develop immunity to a toxin.
think
That's
we
why I
just
defined that
developed the
this is a
immunity to
black
the
carbon
problem.
particle. It's a toxic.
Yeah. We're just immune to the problem, nothing else. We're just
when you-
immune to
when you
hearing
are
about it all the
asking
time.
about solutions and things, I'm so I'm so sick and tired because sometimes I'm made to face, and it's a polite, conversation like this, and then some doctors saying that, good khaiye and ye kariye, wo kariye. Matlab, this is
the
these are very false
superficial.
narratives. And coming from doctors and scientists, it just takes away from all the
Yeah, it's
no,
no,
but
There
denying
is
the
also
climate
effort
narrative.
to, this Doctor for Care. So there are organizations
No, of course,
who
they
are
call
quite
out
proactive.
this, yeah.
They call out.
I'm
but
saying there's some,
no,
that
I'm
are-
saying that there is actually effort to also bring, large part of the medical fraternity on board, because
that's
I
Doctors
think
for Clean Air. Yes, that's
no,
why
they
say
are
the right
doing, but
things.
it's not like if you count actually what percentage of
hardly.
doctors are quite conscious and spreading the awareness is minuscule.
Yes, undoubtedly.
So they are in fact trying actually to bring others on board, and even if you go to any public health center, even in rural area, not doctors, who are general physician and all,
Yes.
they even do not know actually about air pollution's
pollution.
impact
Yeah,
on
yeah.
health.
Yeah.
So there is also a requirement of sensitizing even the health fraternity.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think we've normalized it? Do you think because if the same amount of the AQI here would have been in London or New York, there would have been an outrage. Why do we tolerate
They've gone
it?
through this.
No,
they've
they've
corrected
there.
it.
You look at the history, like
Small
LA.
London.
Why do we
Yep.
tolerate it as a country?
If you look at
Why is there no
photos of
outrage?
California or London 50 years ago,
Yep. It was like
I
that.
mean, the air was much worse.
The present ambassador here in India for the US, he had such an amazing thing to tell us. And he said that when he was a kid, and now they moved, his kid is 8-year-old. Or 11, some 8 to 11, something, 8 year, or he was 8 when they were in LA. And his mom actually wore that complete, that suit, that hazmat suit,
Yeah.
and entered the parliament with his other women to protest against air pollution. It was so bad. And he says when he got transferred here, he came with those thoughts that now I'm coming and this, my children will be probably experiencing this, that how we were choking.
And just because that reminds me of something, it's interesting about, to your question about why we take it.
Yeah, why we tolerate it, why we've
Because-
normalized it so much.
Yeah, this and this is a very lesser known fact. But if you ever have the opportunity to look at the salary slip of a diplomat of the EU or of any of these developed countries, they're actually paid, and now I'm pretty sure they're not going to call me to their next party because I'm saying this,
Yeah,
but
sure.
they're actually paid
It's a hardship
significant,
pay.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
called hardship
they're
pay.
given a compensation for living in Delhi because
Yeah,
of
but
its
that's
air
very
pollution.
valid.
Yeah, it's
very
true.
valid. I didn't
This was,
remember
this
that
was,
at all. Yeah.
instated by the US government for diplomats in Delhi
Even in
back in
UN organizations.
2015. A 30% hike in pay. It's a hardship pay. So people who were in Kabul and Delhi, Kabul not for air pollution reasons, for other reasons.
And what do we get?
Yeah.
Bad air.
For us 150 is a good air day, or 100 is a good
It's not
air
very
air
far
day.
when you have to pay more for insurance.
course.
Living
It's already
in Delhi.
happening.
It's
Yeah.
already happening.
But it's really interesting that it takes an outsider to notice it. As I said, outside of India, it would have been an outrage, but it took someone like Brian Johnson coming
Yeah.
to India wearing a mask,
Absolutely.
carrying the monitor everywhere, walking out of a podcast because the air quality was so bad. And that was making the headlines. It obviously got covered up by something
But that's the
else.
sad part. I mean, we've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
But
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
thought he was dramatic. People thought he was being overly dramatic to be wearing a mask outside. And he said that I was in India and nobody here cares.
No, but then
Nobody's
he's written
wearing
that
a mask.
the next message is said that he lives in that 1 and 2. So anybody who's living in that 1-2 AQI to actually he's actually feeling it, and that is the
Absolutely.
point that we are accepting, we are making it, like you said, the norm. It's
Normalizing
normalizing
300.
it.
We've normalized 300.
Yes.
We all, our media engages, and citizens only engage when the AQI is over 300 because you can actually see the smog in front of your face. So it's hard to ignore, right?
Yes.
That was the only time I saw air pollution getting the time that it deserves on social media,
exactly.
which is when Brian Johnson was talking
Yes.
about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, now it's getting airtime.
Yeah, in April. So we are, in March. So end of March, early April, your AQI level will be maybe around 80 or 90 or 100. Then there will
course,
not
but
be a
the
For the
single
next
They're
6
not
months,
our
it's not
industry.
cool
It's
to
not-
talk
it's not
about
gonna
it.
make the-
They're
it's not
not
gonna make the
making
news.
story.
According
But
to
the
media.
World Cup, I remember cricketers were also wearing
Yeah.
a face mask while they were playing, and fireworks were
One
at
time
that
Sri
time.
Lanka refused to play in Delhi once, and then now this badminton player in this
Yeah.
what's her name? You
She was a
remember?
Russian lady, I think.
Russian, and
Yeah,
she tweeted her. She said the 2 things that are terrible, and I'm not coming back because consecutively for 2 years now she's coming. When she's come to India, she's so sick because it's smog and sanitation.
And that was an Indo court, I think, if I'm not
Indo
wrong.
court.
I
So-
think.
But it
That's
doesn't
what I'm-
matter. There's
It doesn't
no,
matter.
there's
Yeah.
no
As we
That's
filtration
indoor,
of air.
outdoor.
This is the
What I've
point.
learned is that
Hardly
indoor,
matters.
That's
outdoor
another
doesn't
myth,
matter.
right?
It's,
People
it's
don't
the
get
same.
it. Indoor is worse than
you
outdoor.
cannot escape air.
Yeah, you
You
cannot
have to, like I
escape
said,
air.
you are breathing those 12,000 liters of air
You
every
can't
day.
put an air purifier everywhere.
for-
You'll put it in your car, you'll put it in your house, and most people can't afford that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think because these incidents have happened, Brian Johnson, cricket, matches being cancelled, can we use pop culture, media, sport to raise awareness about this issue?
They must, but
If there's an India-Pakistan cricket match which is cancelled
Yeah.
because of air pollution, I can tell you that that's going to get some attention.
yeah.
No, but there was a cricket match where India versus Sri Lanka where one of the Sri Lankan guys
Yeah, he refused to
vomited
play.
on the
Vomited.
pitch,
And he refused to play.
and we were mocking him, and then one of the Indian guys also threw up on the pitch. So that got some attention, but there's just an apathy, man. I mean, towards health. I mean, these are events. And they are events, and they're probably milestones in our journey as well,
But-
because we've been talking
Yeah,
about
we've
this
been
so
talking
long.
about this, but then we can never be a match to this. And this is something I was reading about, that it's from the Roman times that sports and these kind of events were planned only to keep people distracted.
Yes.
And this is exactly what is happening in the world. There are the climate change, air pollution. This is all ways of strategizing, your thoughts, and people are just so blindly sitting and doing this and not doing what this young
Yeah, and look at where
friend is,
where the leadership of the world is heading now, right? I mean, you've got leaders who are kind of taking the world
You
in
can
a
name
different
them.
direction. No, and I've said this many times before. I think we need more women in leadership. I mean, it's I think we need
Shreya.
less
Please.
egos,
Looking at you.
less egos, and more kind of quality
young,
of
we
life.
need young.
No, I mean we
old
need
as well.
targeted, awareness, because what we actually, usually do in terms of awareness. Yes, I mean those who are really concerned, like all of them, they have tried, but unless actually it's happening
Yes.
in mass, and that can only happen if at least at individual level, maybe through doctors and all
Yes.
these messages continuously,
Yeah.
comes to you, because it typically what happens, when you are born and your child is having multiple problems, we take it as granted, like
Yeah.
ye to hona hi tha.
Ah.
We do
I
not
know.
really
I know,
think so.
that's true.
Now with
Allergy.
repeated message awareness at individual level, then you start thinking, yes, I am personally affected and probably my child is affected, so I become serious, and it has to happen at that scale. Then
Yeah.
only people will start
Yeah.
making these demands and everyone will become serious.
All
Because
of you need to become influencers. Everyone needs to start creating reels every day.
Yeah, we get
about
5
this.
retweets.
And-
Yeah, happy with that.
No, but I think
You have to tweet us, retweet us, only then we'll be influencers.
it also goes, I think, I was in a roundtable discussion with a bunch of doctors around who work on lung cancer, and we were talking about the evolution of the Mukesh ad, right? Today, if you watch the no smoking ad in a theater, you'll see Akshay Kumar doing, giving a constructive message, saying don't smoke, instead buy 2 pads for the lady of the house.
Yeah, that's an old
right?
idea.
Versus a Mukesh ad 15 years ago where they show you, which they still show you, a lot of gruesome images and try to instill fear in you, right? But there was actually a study done, I think Shivnadar, it's a very recent study which was done, which said that constructive messaging in the context of public health issues has a much more positive impact, right? Because I mean, I can tell you, my friends who smoke make a joke out of that Mukesh ad, right? They go to the theater, or even if they're outside, it's a joke. Mukesh ad is a joke. Okay, no matter how serious the intent or the consequence, it's a joke. But this new Akshay Kumar ad is killing 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Now, if you pick up the phone, you get that horribly annoying fraud wala message in the last couple of months that, be careful of telemarketing and whatever all those bank OTP frauds are. We can have something similar for air pollution, perhaps. But again, maybe we can disagree on first and second, but that's what, right? Citizens need to demonstrate that it's an issue. Only now you've had, which was that Netflix show, Jamtara, which spoke about all these OTP frauds and all of those things, right? You need it. Fine, I agree that there needs to be government action to lead the way, maybe, but there needs to be citizens also willing to follow that.
Yeah, sure.
Right? If there is an app to complain about a stubble burning incident, a garbage burning incident outside, or if there is an app to complain about firecrackers, start using that. Right? People also need to do that.
Who's going to come and do
Yeah,
the
nobody's
work
gonna
on the ground?
respond,
There are no people. There is no.
The
there-
MCG app is quite effective, though.
Yeah,
Not
some
the
apps are
Delhi
working
one.
and some
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
but because they're a little bit better on their
Correct,
posts, also
correct,
people. But
yeah.
that's the point, that they will have to
It's
make
not
this happen.
perfect anywhere, for sure.
in the
real
US they
people.
have this concept of citizens arrest. I think we need that in India.
Yeah,
When it
that's
comes
what
to
it is. That's what
and
I'm
all
saying.
the
Enforcement.
players' effort has to be, yes.
Whether it is
Enforcement.
citizen, whether it's
citizens
government, or
will be
whether it
told
is
to
a violator,
janta hai, mera
any
baap kaun hai, in
industry.
Delhi, unfortunately.
Is there environmental racism in this as well? Because what happens in the US, and a lot of environmental activists have brought this up, that in poorer communities that live, marginalized communities that live on the outskirts, that's where most of the factories are. That's where families living closer to
Yes, of course.
mining sites. Is it affecting the poorer?
Yeah, definitely.
In this country.
Now,
Of course.
recently, between fighting the waste to energy plant that's been just, it's gone to Bhavana and just in the middle of villages. And the villagers, or as it is, there was a waste treatment plant there, and they're suffering. They're suffering like anything. I had tears when I was speaking to the mothers there, old grandmothers. Every second, third house has a kid. They've lost a kidney. I mean, that is the level of already they have, and now they're bringing a waste to energy plant there. So all the waste is going to be dumped there, and they're fighting it tooth and nail, and they're actually willing to go to any extent, because that's what they say. Our children can't even run 3 minutes. They're panting. They have all the children had rashes. They all showed me. They have continuous. They know they have to live with these rashes.
Yeah.
So the
And
waste
this
of the
is actually
global
the
north.
point, because they are living in that conditions
Yeah.
for so long that they are kind of used to it. But when you actually try to tell them and all, and this is the kind of messaging I'm talking about, then only they can realize that this is happening because of the conditions they are living in, the air they are breathing in, which is not actually happening in general in most of the. In Delhi, still there is some momentum, although not enough. But Mumbai, for example, has been in the news in recent past and all. And but eventually it has to be there.
For a household which is not getting its basic water and electricity and food requirements, you can't expect them to sort of
No,
fight the fight.
and it is not their fight. That's what I meant, because the global north is anyway importing their waste to not importing, exporting. The global north is exporting their waste to the global south. So we're dealing with a lot of the scope 2, scope 3 emissions are theirs, but the burden is put on us. The same way that I think urban cities are doing that to our rural areas, dumping waste in
And
areas where the poor
communities
communities
kind
live.
of also, for example, in India, like in US and all, nobody wants to live near to a highway.
Yeah.
But here it's the opposite actually. Your
People
location
wanna be-
closest to the highway is the prime
It's the
spot
premium.
and all.
Yeah.
But this is where actually you are more exposed and more vulnerable. But because of lack of awareness and all, the kind of
Absolutely.
I think at
perceptions,
some point we're gonna have like AQI that's mapped in cities, and pricing of homes needs to be based on
Based
that.
on
Like, it
that,
has to
yes.
happen, because
100%.
what people are buying right now, like in Gurgaon and stuff on Gold Coast Road, like it makes no sense to me.
Actually, just
Why
to
would you
inform
wanna-
you, in Gurgaon,
Yeah.
we are doing a project with GMD to exactly do this. We are trying to develop some sort of livability
Nice.
index based
Right.
on air pollution, heat, and noise.
Very, very.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good move. Very critical move. I mean,
Yeah.
Because
because
construction is also such a big part of
course.
such a
Construction
big
dust
contributor
is,
to
It's a
air
massive
pollution.
construction dust, fine
And
dust.
Mumbai, as I mentioned, is dug up. The entire city is dug up.
recently,
And
it's
I
been so
always
much,
question,
Yeah.
do we really need so many constructions? I have seen, tons of apartments
So what is the
are
role
vacant
and
all.
contribution of real estate, infrastructure, construction in air
Of
pollution?
course, there's a contribution. I mean, you're creating heat islands, right? The more you concretize, I mean, that's why you have the extreme winters and the extreme summers, right? I mean, then you need more air conditioning, you need
It
more
was never
heating.
like this when we were children. I grew up in Delhi.
Look at Pune. I mean,
used
you're
to be
from Kolhapur. I think your
Yeah,
roots
I was-
are from
I was
Kolhapur.
born in Pune.
Yeah, Pune, you didn't need air conditioning
No.
more than a month in a year. Maybe not even that. And now you need air
And
conditioning
speaking
like
of
10
Pune,
months of the year.
In spite of working for so many years in this, only just when I started working with a co-warrior mom in Pune, I knew her, she was in Gurugram. So about 17 years ago, they moved to Pune because they just found this very polluted, before they one of the child, and they wanted to leave. They moved there. And now it is such a
Pune is the same.
crazy
Pune is the same
situation
as
in
Mumbai.
Pune.
There's
Last week she told me, she says, it's been a week, I can't come out of the house. It's
Yeah.
so bad.
So, what's happening in Pune and that belt in the Western Ghats is that the natives burn the grasses on the hills.
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
thing also.
in this time, February, March, and everything is smoked. At the lower levels where the cities are, Pune or Kolhapur, Satara, everything is just smoked. I mean, AQI, PM 2.5 levels of like 150 to 250, which is insane. And they do it because they want fresh grass for their livestock.
Yeah. I do want to spend a lot of time around solutions. I want to give like 20 minutes to that. I'll come to that, but I'll try to wrap up some questions that I have.
Another 20 minutes.
I'll be very quick. Very
Okay,
quick. Just
okay.
some myths around air pollution that people should know. Just like a quick rapid fire. Any myths, any common myths about air
Two
pollution?
we've spoken about.
Yeah,
It's not only a Delhi problem, it's a all India problem. Wherever you have people, there is air pollution. And I can tell you, even if it's a village with 1,000 people, you do not meet national air quality standards, which are 8 times the WHO standards. That's number one. Number two, indoor air quality is 5 to 10 times worse than ambient air quality. So it's worse inside than outside. It doesn't matter how beautiful the building is, whether it's Terminal 3 of Delhi Airport or whatever. Indoor air quality is always 5 to 10 times, could even be 100 times worse than ambient air quality. So that's true.
And I also mentioned this. So yes, this is a myth. Like we become immune to air pollution if you are really born in high. So that's a clear myth. There is no evidence against that. There is another myth that there is no indigenous evidence that air pollution is actually leading to so much health impacts, and eventually it can also contribute to premature death. But again, there are many studies which clearly show otherwise.
I think also one is the seasonality of it, right? That it's
That's
a
not
year-round
seasonal.
problem, that's for sure. The other thing is on this immunity, there's, for the select few people who know about air purifiers, there was this very dangerous, I call it dangerous debate, which had gone viral on YouTube a couple of years ago, where there was this guy who was saying, you should not use, for those who can afford it also, you should not use air purifiers all the time because it's a double whammy, right? If you're in an air purified environment for 8 hours and you step out, it's going to hit your lungs. And that's absolute garbage. That's not true, right? Because the reality, the way to rationalize it or think of it in a better way, and that's also ironic, is that if you're smoking 20 cigarettes a day, in an air purified environment, you're probably smoking, say, 12 or 14, right? So even within people, even within circles who use air purifiers, there's stuff like this that goes around.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does this affect women and children?
Yeah, so children, of course, that's why we are here. When they're the most vulnerable, even pregnant mothers, they're like Dr. Dey mentioned, it even starts when you conceive. From the time the embryo comes into, they start getting affected. So it's not like even in my this life of advocacy, we said that the newborn baby is a smoker. It's not even a newborn baby; it's a baby before the baby is born as a smoker. And in Delhi, a place like Delhi. So this is, and children being, of course, they breathe faster, so they tend to inhale more. And that's the thing, then they're closer to the ground. So my heart goes out. I mean, in where I live, in my colony, there are about 6 to 7 schools. And it's so sad that I work on this and I've not been able to do a thing for them, that they come out every day and the area is like packed and traffic, and the cars are literally touching them and going, because in every way, whether it's urban mobility or all that, because of that, so much jam there, that they can't even walk, and they're actually all those bus fumes, etc. They're inhaling every single day, whether it's the morning or the afternoon. So that is why when we say that, talk about low emission zones, and we work on asking and requesting government to actually include all this. So so these are the things. Though even in 2019, because in 2017, the Minister of Environment in those days, he said, don't show us Harvard studies and all, because we don't like all that. So,
we have a health minister.
No, he was another.
Who said, eat carrots and you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the same health minister also said that nobody's
that is the same time.
death certificate has air pollution as a cause. But so what are you guys worried about?
This was Minister of Environment. So he said, humko ye Harvard ka study mat dikhaya karo. So then we did a study with even the Lung Care Foundation did a study, and then clearly showed every third child had problems, damaged lungs or various, issues.
I nearly lost my oldest son to air pollution.
So
he had an asthma attack when he was 10 years old in school. And the school had no facility to manage it. By the time they took him to the hospital, he was out of breath. They had to put an epinephrine injection into his heart to revive him. It was very touch and go. So our schools are not even equipped.
And these are still the good schools.
And
but
this is
imagine
this is
what
one of the
happens
best
to
schools
a
of
government
Delhi.
school who never know anything. They don't even
Yeah.
have a crocin or a basic medication. So you have to understand that it has to be for everyone. Whenever anything is being done, it has to be keeping in mind that this is the masses.
I know we spoke about farming, we spoke about crop burning, but is animal agriculture a leading cause of air pollution as well, considering how much land is cleared up to graze animals? What we're doing now is growing crops to feed animals instead of growing crops to feed humans directly. So what does factory farming and animal agriculture have to do with air pollution?
So, I mean, one of the major contributions of this is definitely methane production, but methane is not actually an air pollutant. It's a greenhouse gas. And then obviously it has tremendous implications for climate change. Having said that, what way agricultural sector contributes to air pollution is one, of course, is what is usually debated, stubble burning, but then ammonia emissions from the agricultural fields, because our agricultural productivity uses heavily pesticides and all. So when we emit ammonia, which is a gas, and there is enough sulfur dioxide or nitrogen dioxides in our air, so they react, and then basically they form this secondary PM 2.5 that I talked about earlier. And it means that if we do not really have so much ammonia in our air, it could have actually reduced the secondary PM 2.5. So this is a major source of air pollutions regionally. And in the current National Clean Air Program, actually there is no such, I would say, action plan against ammonia. Now there are certain mitigation measures scientists are talking about, and it's all on the discussion in the policy circle. For example, one can go for neem coated urea as a solutions, and there are many other solutions. But yes, I think that is a clear contribution to air pollution. But yes, methane is a big problem, and in fact, one of the major emitter of methane is this agricultural sector and also solid waste.
Yeah, dairy, meat, cattle,
And
all of
also
it.
this directly from the cattle. Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a big.
You wanted to
Yeah,
touch
so
on
in my
livestock.
ecological restoration kind of efforts in the buffer zones of national parks and forest, tiger reserves, my experience is that you're looking at a loss of biodiversity. Livestock leads to a loss of biodiversity. Your carbon sinks are getting depleted. Okay, that's one direct impact to air pollution. The hooves of these animals, they dislodge the topsoil. So what is compact then becomes kind of this loose. So you're losing your topsoil. So what I'm seeing where I am, because one of my sites is on a riverbed. Every year, when the river flash floods during the monsoon, it's coming down faster and wider, and it's a direct result of livestock. Okay, so I know it's more, that's more climate change, but
all
the
interconnected,
loss
right?
of biodiversity, the depletion of our national parks and tiger reserves. I mean, anything that's Ayurvedic or botanical or medicinal in these forest reserves. Just in one park, Rajaji Tiger Reserve, where I have a site, there are 80,000 livestock. That's according to the census. There may be more that feed on our tiger reserve on a daily basis. Okay, this is a huge problem. And the topsoil getting released, I mean, a lot of it, blows into the air, and a lot of it, just gets washed out into our oceans.
Nutrients, all of it.
All
So
the
moving to a
nutrients
more
gone.
plant-based food system is genuinely something that I advocate for in all shape and capacity because of this animal agriculture, climate change, everything that you mentioned. So,
Yeah.
just a more solid plant-based food system. We've covered solutions for indoor air pollution, and I've made a note which was taking your shoes off, lint roller if you have one, no heavy curtains, so minimalist decor. Kitchen, better exhaust system for kitchen, filtered ventilation, controlling CO2 indoors, however you can. Again, I think better ventilation, no combustion of any sorts. Whether that's candle, even if it's soy-based, it still contributes to off-gassing. I think you mentioned off-gassing as well, just heating up the more heat there is, and varnish and paint. purifiers or plants. I think plants is something we didn't touch upon.
it's a
No
myth.
plants? Plants
Again,
is a
that
myth?
is
That's
going to
another
come.
myth.
I wanted to say that, but we finished and then I
So
said,
plants reduce stress and hypertension, but they have no impact
no
on indoor air
study
quality,
to
no
show- and they
measurable
could be-
impact on indoor air quality.
how many plants together will bring that impact, etc. Like you need 1,500 plants or
And
something.
there's some plants that absorb.
No.
Like,
I mean,
plants
that's
are good
that's
for-
not. I
Measurable.
mean, imagine
Not
PM
measurable.
2.5 going into a leaf, right?
a
It
big
doesn't
myth.
make sense.
Okay.
It's just carbon dioxide, which is
So in my study, PM 2.5 impacts plants, but plants don't impact
Yeah,
PM
that's
2.5.
exactly
because
yeah.
photosynthesis rate would slow down, assumably. I don't know what you're studying.
So
but
the stomata through which the leaves kind of
Breathe.
go through the process of photosynthesis or breathe, gets completely blocked by dust and PM 2.5, these particulates. So that natural process of absorbing carbon and releasing oxygen, it stops. And we've seen ambient levels in November, December, January. If we don't get winter rain,
I'm gonna cut plants off my
if we
list.
don't get winter rain in North India, there is such a huge problem. And that's why the moment we get rain and all these leaves get washed, man, you can breathe again. There is like a noticeable change. And it's not just the particulates, it's the oxygen levels suddenly.
So even if I
pump
have
up.
50 plants indoors, it's not helping
It's not
the
measurable.
See,
air
plants
quality.
cannot absorb in no way particulate
2.5.
matter. What happens is, as they mentioned, that basically the particles get deposited. Okay, so that's it, and it's not enough. So
like
unless
we were
you
talking
really
about the
live,
solar panels, right? There's a layer on top.
Yeah.
You have to
Even that
keep
gets affected.
Yeah.
So what absorbs PM? If there's something,
no,
it's
there is
just air
nothing
purifiers.
Yes, unless you are using some filters. Yes, they are quite efficient
just
in
air
absorbing.
purifiers. There's no.
But yes, there are studies actually for outdoor conditions in UK and all, where it is shown that if you do plantation in a certain way, because
You create
the
carbon sinks.
it creates carbon sinks. Number one, so
That is
it
also
cools
trees.
down locally.
You can't plants and trees are two
Na-
very different.
native,
But also what
native
happens-
trees and different species, not monoculture.
Yeah.
Not monoculture.
But also what happens, because these particles, they get deposited on the plants and all, in a way, then in certain areas you can reduce exposure
Exposure is
to
reduced,
some
yeah.
extent in outdoor conditions. For example, if your school, and in fact this study was done in a school where the school is adjacent to a major highway, so what they did this plantation all along the school boundaries, and a certain type of plantations actually, then basically particles are kind of deposited on the plants and it's not really diverting. But plants are not absorbing, that is very clear.
I used to
I
believe.
don't imagine a leaf taking in like PM10.
Yeah,
No,
fair,
no,
fair
absolutely
enough.
can't absorb a
Okay,
particle.
myth busted even for me particularly.
Yeah.
So
There are studies going on, but they're very nascent about, I don't know if it's very nascent. I was reading about how someone in the UK is trying algae, water-based,
So
stuff.
actually,
but-
one of those guys sent me one of these machines, and I tested it in my office, and I found
Didn't work?
no delta in PM
And
2.5,
with I already
no
know the
measurable
solution.
delta in
Yeah.
The solution
using
is
moss.
only that you should write
Yeah.
in the capital in
Using
the end
moss.
is demand clean air.
Demand
There is
cleaner,
no
that's what I was coming to.
compromise.
So
There is
okay,
no
We have to
everything we've
reduce the
discussed.
emissions at
The
the
emissions
source.
have to-
Anything else is a distraction.
Yes.
Any politician, anybody telling
These
you
are
smoke
none of
tower
them are
lagana hai,
solutions.
yeah,
It's not doing anything.
or gaadi on off, like it has to be comprehensive and it needs to be across the board. Like one small thing is not going to do it. It's like people ask me, odd even से क्या air pollution कम हो गई? It's like नहीं, odd even air pollution कम करने के लिए किया ही नहीं गया था. It was done to create awareness. Awareness precedes change. That was the first time we ever discussed air pollution at a scale.
No, or
in
even pura
India.
sal chahiye. That's the point. That
Yeah.
You
we
want to
have
talk about
work.
odd even for anyone who doesn't know?
Sorry?
Would you want to touch upon what odd even is for anyone who
Yeah,
doesn't
I mean, I can.
First,
Since it
know?
was
Very
my-
quickly, super
Everybody
quickly,
knows.
super quickly.
Everybody knows it.
No, everybody in Delhi
I
would
know.
know. So, in 2015, as an emergency response to the
Graded
the
response.
apocalypse in Delhi, or the air emergency in Delhi, the government of Delhi, and I was part of that air pollution think tank team. We did an odd even measure to to create awareness in Delhi that there is an air pollution problem. And the measure was that on every alternate day, you could operate
Then it's
only
an odd date. You take an odd. Only the number with
number
your
plate
license
has to
number
be
plate
odd.
has to be odd.
And
Last
on
two
an even
digits.
day, it had to be
It's an even.
Yeah.
But that's not
So
a
it-
sustainable solution.
Yeah,
it's
it's not.
Yeah, I mean,
No, but if you make it
essentially, I'd
difficult to
much rather-
drive, then yes. But then before that, lot other things.
And
Then
there
it
were
should be
so
throughout
many
the year.
exceptions to
No, it
that.
shouldn't be
There
throughout
were
the year.
so
You
many
need to
exceptions
make
to
car
that.
ownership more
Yeah, but
prohibitive
this is one of those
by
things.
raising taxes.
Taxes, yes.
That,
And you
of
need
course.
shared mobility, public transportation. Otherwise, all your colonies will just have parked
No, but
cars.
that ownership will come now in the future. For the present, this is what it is. So this
Yeah.
will stop people from. But then the people, the later
then
People
buying
have to
two
be a
types of
water
cars.
license.
Yes,
They're
yes.
actually purchasing
That
cars.
was
Yeah.
the response actually
Yeah.
when Ardivan was implemented.
Okay. Because there's couple solutions we hear all the time: electric vehicles, banning crop burning, smoke towers. We've already discussed that. Public transportation expansion, which might be quite effective, or even, of course, air purifiers, green crackers, work from home policies on high pollution days, which
There's nothing
doesn't
called
really
green
help.
crackers.
Crackers are
There's
no
nothing.
green crackers.
There's
Please
no
put it
green
in the myth.
crackers,
All
yeah.
of these.
Yeah.
Keeping that aside, if I have to hear from you, what are the most effective solutions? What can government do? What can policymakers do? What can business owners do? But also innovators like startup founders and citizens just across the spectrum. If you had to form a task force and delegate one thing to each of these groups, what would you do?
Implementation. That's what is lacking, and
Yes.
enforcement. That's it.
Because for each and every sector, the solutions are there.
Different.
There are
What does it
different
look like
solutions.
for governments? To sum
there
it
are
up.
different solutions available for transport, for industry, for power plant and all. All it requires is proper implementations. For example, this debate has been going on and on for ESP in power plants. So solution is there. Even for transport also,
They keep pushing it out.
the multiple solutions are there. But the thing is that implementation, as I said, I fully
So
agree.
in a lot of these areas, just think about it. Most heavy industry, all these automobile manufacturers that have invested in combustion engines, whether it's petrol or diesel, they don't want change, right? So you have lobbies, you have vested interests. I mean, there was this whole wave of articles over the last 10 years that's talking that EV vehicles mein aag lag jati hai. It's like combustion engine mein, there are more incidents in combustion engine vehicles catching fire than EVs. But you're just trying to, manage, the messaging so that people are like, scared. People don't shift.
Right.
You're avoiding that shift.
If governments had to do one thing, what would that be? What does that
Enforce the
implementation
existing
look like?
policies.
I would say incentivize good behavior and penalize bad behavior.
What about
Make the
businesses?
polluter pay.
Yeah.
Make the polluter pay.
Incentivize the. I always say.
Let's say
penalize.
I should not be allowed to throw out more than 1 kilo of kachra from my house in a day, something like that. If I do, I have to pay a fine. Usage of electricity, buying a personal vehicle. I mean, these are privileges. I mean, this is a city that's unviable for human habitation now, and most of our urban centers are. So how do we get things back on track? We need to
And the
change human
government has to change
behavior.
the approach because they are working only for a city, a car-centric city. You're not doing anything else. You're just doing
And
whether
you're
you're
investing all our
underpasses,
taxpayer money on more
flyovers, your
highways,
On
which
the
means
underpasses,
more
flyovers.
cars, which
Yeah.
means
your
more
road
cars.
widening and cutting trees for that. So this is just that approach has to change.
It's all a vicious cycle.
But it's not.
Look at Bangalore, for example.
Yeah. What happened to them?
You
I mean,
build.
such a
No,
good
I'm
city.
saying you build more. Over bridges. You build more. All of these things. You are all increasing
More
space
vehicles.
for
More cars.
Cars.
Yeah. Anything that business owners, innovators, startup founders can do to help solve this problem?
He's the businessman.
I think there's a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity here. I think there's a lot of room for innovation. Clean tech is an area. Sustainable tech, renewable tech. I keep reading about new things and innovations with even solar cells. I think, we spoke briefly about our energy mix in India, and 70% is still thermal. But there's an opportunity to, reverse that and make 30% thermal or even less, nuclear energy or whatever. I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of, this word sustainability, and, I hate it. I mean, public companies have
So it's a
sustainability
commercial
committees,
business now.
and it's just I don't think anybody really understands the name, what that means. Even I don't understand what that means.
the name of
because
my
I'm
podcast.
building a home-based...
Of course, sorry. I was just going to say that. That's
No, we should.
sustainability, which
We should, but you're right.
can't
Most
say we
people
hate
come
it on
on
a
it.
show.
No, most 90% of people say we hate that word. I'm like, and then in the end, I ask them, what does it mean to
Yeah.
you? That's my closing
No,
question.
but it's
But you're right. You're absolutely right.
I'm
No,
trying
it's
to
a
be
word that I'm
sustainable.
trying to.
Just for the FYI, the first EV car in India came to my house in
Yeah.
1997.
Wow.
Okay, I mean, but sustainability is expensive, man.
Yeah,
That's-
no, it's
I don't know how
become
you...
commercial.
Sorry?
It's become commercial. Even like air pollution, people are building these fancy oxygen labs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's become a thing that you sell products on. It's become
I will-
about consumption.
Absolutely. I will give you one simple example. What is delaying this, FGD implementation in the power plants? Basically, because the cost of implementing FGD is enormous. That cannot happen in all the power plants across the country without raising
Government.
the power tariff.
Yeah.
Now, question is, are people willing to pay whatever extra?
Yeah.
It becomes a vote bank issue. 1 crore per megawatt.
Yes,
It's
I think
1 crore per megawatt.
Yeah, I think probably 1 lakh crore or something is required for all the power plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know the amount was that huge.
Yeah, it's 1 crore per
Massive.
megawatt.
It's very
Yeah.
costly
Yes,
because
they
you
give
need
electricity
particularly for
free, so
No. What I meant is that, like,
no, I'm
I
saying
thought
that the
building center
technology,
was
and this is
and
what
all, I thought
actually
it was- but
you're,
this is
no,
huge,
you say
so-
this is huge because the kind of technology that we have
Yeah.
is super costly, and this is actually my answer what you asked. In addition to what Jay has mentioned, that I think there is tremendous opportunity to develop low cost solutions.
Yeah.
For many of
Clean
the
tech
clean tech solutions, which
Disposable
is
free,
feasible.
consumable free,
Yes.
low energy footprint.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, I have a clean tech business. So these are the principles I'm thinking, how
Yeah,
do we
of
work? What
course.
do we think about?
Because
But
we
these are
need
the things that
innovators, we
think
need
about.
entrepreneurs, we
Yes.
need a new way of wave of investors and business owners coming
Yeah.
and saying, sustainability is profitable or solving for air pollution
Yeah.
should be profitable.
And somebody's already doing it. So it's hard to-
Absolutely. So
no, that's exactly what I was gonna say to. I don't know. I think you were only saying that it's becoming a marketing.
yeah, it's
gimmick,
become
but
about consumption.
I think there's two sides to it, right? One part of it is that it has to become affordable, right? In the context of stuff like what we were talking about for industrial level stuff, right? But I argue I have so many of these, like my parents' generation will say, oh, bamboo toothbrushes have become an Instagram fad. And I'm like, okay, isn't it your mother who talks about a datun? Go out and use that. For every bamboo toothbrush, there is also a datun, right? So, I mean, one is, yes, what is expensive has to be made affordable. But at the same time, I think for sustainability to be something that can actually sustain, there has to be a profit motive, at least from a business perspective.
But as she said, I think it has to be, if you're building something, it has to be for everyone.
Yeah,
It can't
yeah.
be an air purifier that is so expensive that only like 1% of our population can afford it, because, we mentioned how in rural areas, it is the poor that's, the
Yeah.
poorest who are suffering the most. So for them, air purifier is not a solution.
No,
So
even
building a
in
solution,
urban
it has to
also,
be
even
for
Delhi
everyone.
also,
Even
you
in
just
Delhi,
see how many
yeah.
are actually
Yeah.
Most people
using-
don't even have doors and windows in their homes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that you have to
majority of the
understand that
population.
This is the majority. I mean,
But your question about businesses, right? I mean, I think it depends, as Doc was also saying, it depends entirely on your business model, right? Zomato can pick up, they've improvised by saying, okay, instead of 4 bikes delivering 20 pizzas, we'll have a large order delivery fleet EV bike going out, right? So that's sort of arguably reducing their carbon footprint. But again, depends on a case-to-case basis.
I want to ask you about students,
Yeah.
the youth, and also activists. What role do they have to play and what can they do? Anyone
Look,
listening to this?
I think for young people, for students, the biggest part in and of themselves from one student to another, and also in terms of activists, I think the largest issue is what I said earlier, right? Making the message relevant to the audience. That has to be the main thing. That being said, I think youth groups, schools play a very active role in building awareness, right? So one part of how my environment journey started was air pollution. The other part was Once in 3 weeks, I had an environment workshop in school, and I would go out of my way to bunk that workshop. I was the teacher's pet in all other classes, but I thought that was drab and boring, and I didn't want to attend that class. But when the two things came together is when I actually developed an interest, right? So I think climate education is thrown around a lot as a term, but it needs to be more than a two-mark definition of what global warming and greenhouse gases is, right? It needs to be a lot more holistic. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say cringy politician type stuff that yuva pidi hai ye wo. I mean, I think our society needs to start taking young leaders more seriously. I remember I'd walked into the Delhi Metro's office at the age of 16 to start my first campaign, which then went on for 3 years. But for the first 3 months, I used to walk into that office and the receptionist would look at me, and the first day I walked in, she asked me, "Tum apni mummy kho gayi ho kya? What are
Mummy
you
kho
doing?"
gayi.
Yeah, like what are you doing wandering in here? Right? So we live in a country where we talk about India's demographic dividend, we talk about Yuva PD, but we don't actually empower or take our
Take them
kids seriously.
seriously. Yeah, absolutely.
So-
Anything you wish mums, women, you in general to act on this?
Yeah, like I said, demand. They have to, everyone will have to come out. They have to, if they care for the children and their health, there's nothing more important than that. We know that is a very common emotion, and that's what we exploit as mothers, not only in pan India but also globally. That or even when we speak to a politician, your local councillor, MLA, that's what we remind them. Your parents too. How can you do this to your children? This is something you are constantly. Offering them this toxicity, and that needs to stop. So I think that makes it, and then obviously, like all the advocacy and the wonderful things that everybody shared here, that helps, yes. But the lead will come in from, I know a huge number of women on a daily basis. In fact, it's become lesser now. It's so sad because everybody is getting disheartened. Who would call me that the RWs are coming in the way and they're trying to do waste management, or they, the whatever they're doing, that some politician will come in the way and stop it. Those kind of things. And can we have get support? What can we do? Writing letters, these things. But now everybody is getting exhausted. So that is why it's not for us. It's not our job. You will have to make us do it. The laws are there. If you do it, well and good. You don't do it, whether I'm a violator or the government is a violator, everyone needs to be penalized.
accountable.
Everybody needs to be prosecuted, convicted. There's nothing less than that now. It's costing lives. It's costing health for our children. Even if it's not lives, because I'm now correcting myself. Learning from Dr. Dey and many others that we don't have now the health ministry also keeps saying that to us. So but then there is connection that yes.
Doctor, what about schools, universities, academia, scientists?
No, I mean, obviously, as a scientist, my job is, or our job in general is to generate evidence and use that evidence basically for effective policy making. But I would actually advocate what he mentioned. I mean, mentioned that I think there is a need to really make environment in general in a much more effective way part of our curriculum system. It is there as per the Honorable Supreme Court, but mostly what students are learning as part of their environmental curriculum are simple definitions. They cannot really connect to day-to-day things.
Yes.
I think if we can make that education is more effective, and this is where again I think some of the academic institutions, higher educational institutions can think of taking some sort of program where they engage with schools and colleges and actually train the trainers basically. In fact, we did a couple of such workshops where we actually told teachers what it means, how they can further simplify the message to the students, but more such effort is required.
My last question to all of you is, what is the one thing that you would tell every Indian listening to this about air pollution that would change their perspective forever, but that would also empower them to act? Starting with you.
I think everything that we've said here is about air pollution and health. And I think all those studies and everything that's being said, that how it's affecting is not of the lungs. It's about, from top to toe. Every part of the human body is affected, your cognitive development of the children, etc. So I think that is what it should be the most important thing. After all, this is what we want our family and our children to be safe, to be healthy, to be happy. And that's totally connected. So you cannot progress if you don't have health.
And what they can do is demand cleaner.
Yes, that of course, very important. Thank you, Shreya.
I've learned.
My simple message would be, that air pollution is a really, major concern today, and without addressing air pollution, nobody can live quality life.
What's your tagline for what an individual can do? Hers is demand cleaner. What would you say? Someone
Right.
asking,
So
what can I do about
obviously,
it?
I mean, individual level, you have to contribute also to the solutions. But at the same time, also, I think there should be enough awareness to demand clean air. I think it has to be both ways.
I just see that there's a selfish reason here, right? It's about self-love. How can you not love yourself and your children or your parents and your loved ones? That there's a selfish interest at play here to have a better quality of life. And it's a birthright. It's a constitutional right. So, I mean, I know we all
Well
came
said.
up with the
I mean,
line, "Saas nahi to vote nahi." That's it. I mean, that just says it all. "Saas nahi to vote nahi."
What can an individual do listening to this if they want to start acting on it?
Go speak to your local politicians. I mean, I think that's the starting point, right? Go speak to your local politicians, educate them, because even nobody's aware if the parliament has not had discussions on this issue. Your local politician is certainly not aware.
And the awareness is like, make complaints. Don't just write on the social media and forget. Make complaints.
Yeah.
If you see any violations around you, you don't have to be out. Whatever you see a tree being cut, you see waste being burned, you see vehicle emissions, constructional emissions, make a complaint. That's what makes us.
I think we guys have just. I think we've lost touch with humanity. I mean, humans were always part of nature, and I think that connect, has been broken. And I think we need to kind of, that Avatar movie, that connect has to be, formed again.
I think I was going to say exactly that use your vote wisely. And I think we need to productively politicize the discourse around this. Productively being the key word. But yeah, I think we need to use our vote and make air pollution a voting issue.
I love that. The air we breathe is killing us, but it is a man-made problem. So I'm hoping there is a man-made solution. I know we can fix it. The only question is, will we? It's not, can we or should we? It's all about will we, and what is it going to take? How many deaths, literal deaths, before we begin to act. But this conversation has definitely opened my eyes. It busted a lot of air pollution myths that I had. I've learned so much. I've been taking notes the entire episode. So I hope the audience takes away from this as well, and we finally begin acting on something that's affecting this entire country, the entire world for that matter. But we live in, as we said, 100 out of 100 most polluted cities would be in India. So it's time that we began acting. So thank you so much for doing this with me, and thank you so much for all the work that you do in this space, so that we can all breathe clean air. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shreya.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.